Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. Obviously, we don't have N for us tonight, so we are going to be talking about role-playing games, and Newguy's gonna cough. Thank you for muting. That was real good right there. So it's mostly just gonna be me and Vegas, although apparently Vegas is just providing color commentary, and it's just gonna be me talking into a microphone for 4 hours.
Amazing color commentary.
And Newguy, who has less experience DMing than Vegas and I, is just going to be asking questions and maybe chiming in as he sees fit. I was hoping PR would join us, but I guess he couldn't make it today. I mean, he's been having internet issues as of 2020, so I don't blame him for skipping this one. So the topic for today that we will be discussing in our dire roundtable is actually quite a few topics under the umbrella of encounters. We're going to be talking about systems that aren't Dungeons and Dragons, which is why the category is tabletop RPGs. Thank you for the sparks, DM Daddy, aka Vegas. What was I saying? I play a lot of different systems outside of Dungeons and Dragons. I think Dungeons and Dragons is an excellent system. One of my favorites. 5th edition, that is. But it only can do a certain kind of game. A very open-end kind of game, but if you're not playing mid to high fantasy, huge heroic characters, it doesn't quite work as well as other systems. One thing that I have a deep passion for is science fiction / space fantasy and everything in between. And while I have purchased and acquired a lot of different 5th edition takes on far future, none of it hits home with me. And I don't want to repeat too much that I've already said on previous streams, but I'm just recounting. One system I have found that so far is hitting the nail right where I wanted it is Alternity. However, I DM'd it for a month. No, much more than that. At least maybe let's say 10 sessions, and I found a pretty large flaw with its game design that isn't really a flaw. I'll get into it. However, I have played other systems, and I have noticed that systems that have me instantly able to jump in and start DMing are ones that have guidelines for two things. One, and this is the most important, how to make your own monsters within the rules of the game. And two, how many monsters of what kind and what size and what shape and what power equals the party at X level. Now, a lot of systems like Savage Worlds, Chronicles of Darkness, and most systems, I think, instead of having a specific kind of monster block and character block, they both use the same character sheet, and it's the same mechanics for both sides, and so it's really up to you to decide how many, like, for Chronicles of Darkness, each skill is up to 5 pibs, each attribute is up to 5 pibs, and you kind of just decide how many pibs they've got, and you can compare that yourself to the party, and you can kind of figure that out on your own. So a lot of those systems don't really need this in place, because you're just basically, you make a player character who's weaker or stronger than the current players, and you pit them against them. So we're not going to be talking about those systems. We're going to be talking about systems that have guidelines and instructions for making monsters and or how to make encounters. So let's go ahead and start with 5th edition. Now, unfortunately, because 5th edition is mostly physical media, and my wife wants to photobomb me. Yeah, Vegas can't see it because he's not watching the stream. What an asshole.
I'm watching both streams.
Damn.
Stop.
Triple monitor setup. Alright, so because I don't have D&D Beyond, because I paid for all my books physically like an idiot, I can't pull my dungeons, my DMG on screen, unfortunately. So instead I have... Oh. Hang on, I think I can do this. I need someone to look at the stream and see if I can get this right.
You went to infinity and beyond briefly.
Is that good?
I'm waiting for it to load.
Man, I need a third monitor.
Nope, you're still on the alternative PDF.
Okay. For some reason, I couldn't window capture Chrome. So that's gonna happen again. Spoiler alert. So this is the SRD. This is the best SRD I could find about monsters in general. We're just gonna do a quick rundown of 5th edition's monster creation. In fact, I'm gonna get my DMG so I can
kind of compare and contrast what's actually there.
Right. So I can actually talk about what's really going on. And 5th edition is going to be our baseline because 5th edition does encounter building the best. It doesn't do it perfectly, obviously, but it definitely does it the best I've seen. And if you disagree, chime in. Oh, and anyone watching, sorry, hang on. If anyone watching has a question at any point, throw it up in chat. I got the chat right in front of me. Once we're finished with our thought, we will answer any questions and all questions to the best of our ability. Please try to keep them topic related. Mixer, try not to get too weird. We know you like to be weird.
Go home, Mixer, you're drunk.
So my question was going to be maybe a little bit for like an advance to what you're going to talk about, but I'm still... It's been the one question I want. So the monster manual in D&D 5e that comes basic, just the normal one. From what I understand from your perspective, Jaken, and I think Vegas has briefly talked about it, is that it's mostly balanced and correct. So when it goes for CR levels, it matches what you do for balance and stuff.
Except for fucking hobgoblins.
Hobgoblins.
They're tougher?
They are way tougher than their CR.
Yeah, they're a CR 1/2, and if you build them according to the rules in the DM's
they're
guide,
like CR2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sure there are other outliers, but I can't go through the entire stat block. The entire book, comparing to my book. High-level encounters are incredibly iffy. I can talk about that. Let's just focus on Dungeons & Dragons for now. So, to really simplify it, because unfortunately I can't show it on screen, so I don't want to burden you guys with too much information that I can't visually articulate. Creating a new monster, or modifying a currently existing monster of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons divides it into 2 categories, offense and defense. And each offense and defense is rated from CR 0, 1/8, 1/4, 1/2 to 1, all the way to CR 30. And once you have your offense value and your defense value, you add them together and divide by 2. Now, the only thing I don't like is they have this kind of gray area where it's like, I don't know, you get to decide if you round up or down. We don't care. You figure it out. So that makes it kind of hard when you have like a 5.5. It's like, is this a 5 or a 6? You just kind of have to make a judgment call.
I would treat that like every other instance of rounding in 5e, and because specific beats general, and since there's no specific, the general rule on rounding is you round down unless it specifically tells you to do otherwise.
No, but I mean, like, in the Dungeons & Dragons manual, it says round the average up or down to the nearest challenge rating to determine your monster's final.
Does it?
Like, it literally says, it's up to you, bro.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to grab my DM's guide, too.
Yeah, for anyone who has Dungeon Master's Guide at home, the creating monster technically starts on page 273, although this is just a couple paragraphs of intro. It really gets into the meat at 274. Blinky. I was in a party of 3 level 20 players, and we beat Baphomet and a smaller demon about 3 rounds, and I ate his heart. First of all, gross. Second of all, most D&D encounters end in about 3 rounds.
Yeah, that's actually as I understand it, the balanced combat length.
That being said, I have run a campaign all the way to 20, and we did 1 adventure post level 20, and I had planned to do more, but it is a lot of work, especially since this was pre every adventure book. So we didn't have stuff like I think Tiamat was the only adventure book that was out when I did this. So the only
Rise.
the only new 20 CR 20 plus creature we had was Tiamat, and I was like, great, this doesn't help. So every single boss fight was a homebrew monster because there wasn't a whole lot of CR 20 plus monsters available. Yeah, the higher level you go, the more you're going to have to either homebrew or just kind of wing.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk briefly about encounter building in Dungeons & Dragons. This is for the uneducated. If you already know, this is just going to be establishing a baseline for the rest of the conversation. Every monster has an assigned challenge rating from 0, 1/8, 1/4, 1/2, 1, all the way to 30. And each challenge rating has a corresponding experience point value. And the way you establish an encounter is you take a character level, and each character level has an easy, moderate, hard, and deadly amount of experience for that level. You multiply that by the amount of players of that level, and then that's your pool of experience to spend on an encounter when you're trying to get into a certain category. This is not an exact science, but it's an excellent metric. And then, of course, if you are having multiple opponents, you multiply their total XP by depending on how many there are, because if you go beyond the player count, you're going to have a lot of extra actions. So even if the characters or the monsters are weaker than the players, extra actions, because 5th edition has scrunched numbers, so a goblin could somehow conceivably kill a 20th level character if the D20s really hate that player.
Wrong way.
Right, yeah. So the more actions a encounter have, the more multiplied their experience value is. However, if you have a highly optimized group, in my 1 to 20 campaign that I ran over the course of 2 years, hey ESO, I started to just ignore the multiplier, and they were still trouncing everything. So, kind of, if you have a really well-made group with lots of magical items, you may have to wing it, but that's GM fiat. Right now, we're just sticking to, I wouldn't say rules as written, more like guidelines as written. Why is your name in pink? I think it's random what color your name is. I wouldn't stress it too much. Also, those aren't the kind of questions we're here to answer, Alinia.
I mean, as an example of the whole goblin trouncing a higher level, I mean, that's a little extreme, but my game last night, I'm playing a 5th level monk and was almost downed in a round and a half by a single ghoul, just because shit rolls on my side and nothing but crits coming at me.
On screen now, you'll see the experience points by challenge rating. It doesn't have all the way to 30, but that's just kind of what we're talking about. So, the Dungeon Master's Guide articulates 4/5 different metrics for determining a monster's CR. For defense, you take a combination of their armor class and hit points, which for some reason ends at 19, and I'll never know why the armor class ends at 19. I don't know why it does that. And then for offense, you either take your attack bonus and damage per round, which is done via average, or you take the damage per round and the save DC if the monster uses save DCs more than it attacks. And once you have your average, you have your CR. It is a common misconception that CR of a level equals a party of 4. That's not exactly 1-to-1. Especially since the CRs go all the way to 30. Oh, and guys, the Twitch names are client-side as well. So it'll be different for everyone. Thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for being so engaged. No,
well, and I think, I mean, just to touch on CR equals party of 4 of that level, that's the intent that needs to be muted. Why are you so loud, phone? That was the intent, I believe, back in 3rd edition. That's how they were building things, and Wizards has strayed away from that. And that's more of an us thing, like a player thing or DM thing, where we need to just start learning to separate
CR from player level.
party level.
Yeah.
Because that is not an equivalent exchange.
Also, again, this is kind of I'm just briefly talking D&D because it's going to be our baseline. Certain monster features which affect accuracy, AC, etc., will multiply that. And also, if a creature has damage resistances or damage immunities, that's going to multiply its effective hit points for purpose of calculation. And that's basically how you make a monster stat block in 5th edition. You plug in a bunch of numbers, and then you do a bunch of math, and the equation spits out a CR, and then you run with that. This is a very effective tool. It works often. There are times where it gets a little borked. Like if you have an incredibly offense-heavy monster, it sometimes feels like they shouldn't be the CR they are. Because, gosh darn it, if the players would just hit, it would be over by now. But also, the monster can one-shot players, so every round, their damage potential gets cut by 1/4 if it's a party of 4. So it can get a bit wonky, but especially if you're throwing a CR1 Spectre at your level 1 party and wonder why one of your players is dead. Like dead. I'm not talking about anyone specifically, my brother. Happened to me. First roll of the first session of the game, and my bard died. Still bitter. All right. So that's,
you don't say.
That's 5th edition. Now, because I have my wonky setup right now with OBS, I don't want to go back to the 5th edition SRD because every time I switch between the PDFs and the SRD 5th edition, it does this. So I'm just going to close that window, and we're just going to go with the PDFs now.
Okay.
So the first system that I was really enjoying of science fiction flavor was a game that has 2 names. What's Old is New, and this was the new variant, NEW. I don't know why they went with those names, because it's confusing when I say I'm playing new, and like, new what? This system was based off of D6 dice pool, which I believe, I don't know if it was invented by, but for me, iconically, West End Games Star Wars from the 80s was a D6 additive dice pool system. Additive means you take a bunch of D6s, you roll them, and you add them all up, and that's your result. Whereas dice pool's target number is like Chronicles of Darkness, where you roll D10, and for every D10 that is 8 or higher, that is 1 success. That's the difference between the dice pool systems. So the problem with D6 additive as a concept is it has an incredibly sharp power creep.
Mm-hmm.
Every D6 you add, it gets outlandish. And so right now on the screen, if I'm not mistaken, yes, is the monster creation section of New. And I was adhering to this quite religiously because I was coming from 5th edition where it worked. And this is the first system where it doesn't work. And I'm going to have to remind myself why it doesn't work. I think it actually is a fundamental flaw with the system, unfortunately. I would love to recommend New, but I won't because it has problems right here. Because of the way they do defense, really. I do not want to dive deep into it, but effectively, the biggest problem was, you know what, it'd probably be better to just bring up a stat block. Alright, here is the biggest problem with how New made monster stat blocks. Every monster stat block has 4 defense values. These are the target numbers needed to hit with an attack in order to hit. That they break up into melee, ranged, mental, and vital. And vital is basically like non-damaging physical effects, and mental is non-damaging.
Just looking at this, I would never run this game.
Well, here's the problem. Because every roll is a number of these added together, there will be monsters who have a defense score that is unobtainable of a player at a certain level. Which means, for example, right here, this human bounty hunter, let me do some quick math. If you only have 4d6, you will never hit
Range.
a 28. Now, if
Yeah.
I am not mistaken, I believe there was a wild die explosion mechanic, so technically you could, if one of your dice, your special wild die was a 6, then it explodes. I may just be, because I have West End games fresh in my mind, for reasons I won't get into right now. I think there is an explosion mechanic in this game, which means you could conceivably do it, but on paper, it's not going to happen. And this worked in both directions. Players also have these same defense values.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if a NPC block like this one, who rolls 46 for brawling, may never hit a player.
Right.
This is obviously a problem because you can only throw encounters at your party that fits into their range. And another thing that makes it a problem is, unlike 5th edition, where everyone has the same proficiency bonus, and they may vary in their attribute modifier, they're going to fall somewhere within the ballpark of +1 to +10. Whereas in New, you can make an entirely non-combat character, or you can make a battle munchkin.
Mm-hmm.
And if you try to include everyone in the fight, your battle munchin's just going to tear through it. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if everyone's playing the game for different reasons, and you're really good at spacing out, okay, we're going to have a fight for my fight boy, and a social encounter for my social guy, then it can all work out so the guy who's built the munchkin can go ham and feel great. Ultimately, though, the problem with the mechanics of building a character in New stretch even farther into the bad territory, because let me see if I can find this chart. Yeah, here it is. All of these charts, actually. So if you see here, the MDP is the max dice pool, which is effectively their version of challenge rating.
Okay.
Max dice pool is the maximum number of d6s they're ever going to be throwing at one time.
Okay.
They abbreviate it MDP. Now, if you see, they divide every single monster into 7 categories: artillery, brute, expert, ninja, skirmisher, support, and trickster. And every single attribute, offense, defense,
Jesus.
health, and soak, is an exact calculation based on their MDP. Which means every MDP for brute is exactly the same. The only thing that changes is their exploits. You get to decide what and how many exploits you give. That is the only variant from a brute to a brute to a brute of the same NDP, which means there is pretty much only 7 monsters in this game. Hi, Evil Hunk. And with only minor variances. It gets really dull. And then, of course, you have your power creep problem, which is its own bag of worms.
Well, now the exploit mechanic there, I can say just on paper, I'm a fan of.
The exploits?
Yeah, because that's quite frankly, that's how I build my monsters anyway, is I find something that's similar to what I'm looking for, and I flavor it.
Yeah, and these are flavors. I mean, they present them as specific to each class, and there's a list, and some have way more than others. Like the brute goes on a whole column. Right now we're looking at New. The system is called New. It is a subsystem of what's old is New. The New is the futuristic subset, and old is the fantasy medieval subset. Obviously, you can make your own using these as guidelines, but artillery has 2 options presented in the book, and brute has a ton.
Right.
And then there's also general/unusual, which is just whatever. Newguy, you actually played in New as a player.
Yep.
Do you have anything to add as far as how combat encounters went?
It's been a while, though. I've played a lot of games since New.
That's true. Well, I wanted to present New as an example of how to absolutely bork the monster creation mechanic which in turn, if your monsters aren't made in an interesting or dynamic way, your encounter mechanic isn't going to work. I don't actually. This book. It's been a long time since I combed through it, so I don't have everything mentally indexed. So I don't actually know. I remember there having guidelines for encounter building, but I don't know where it is in the book, and I don't want to go sifting through it. You need a hug, okay?
If I remember my experience from New, I think I might be wrong, so don't quote me on this, but I think my thing was mechanically I like the system, but I felt like unlike the ND5e or Alternity and so forth, I didn't feel the growth as much. It was a slower growth for the players,
Well,
if I remember right.
A lot of systems are going to feel slower growth in 5th edition, that's for sure. So we're starting off talking about the game mechanics, and we're going to talk more about in practice afterwards. But I really wanted to focus in on mechanics because it's something, as someone who's constantly looking for new systems, this is something that constantly draws in. Oh no, he can have hugs, but not real hugs. It's just for streaming. It's just kind of a virtual environment. Good vibes. That's all we can give you. That brings me to Alternity. I am really enjoying Alternity, but the more I played it, the more the adversary creation system was insufficient for various reasons. So, in Alternity, players are level 1 to 10. 1 minimum, 10 is maximum. And the way they present adversaries, which is a catch-all term for monsters, is that threat rating equal to the party level is around where you need to be. They also divide it into subcategories for each monster. They have minions, standard, champion, and boss, where one standard is supposed to be an encounter's worth for one player of the same level equal to threat rating. So a threat rating 3 standard is 1-to-1 for an encounter, a level 3 player character. That isn't to say that it's going to kill them, that's just how they present it, because standard monsters get trashed real quick. But I noticed a really things are just going by real quick. Well, Evil Honk, if you were looking for science fiction / science space fantasy, I highly recommend Alternity. Good luck finding a group though, because it's very obscure, unfortunately, because I love it.
You're welcome again, by the way.
Yes, Vegas put me onto it. So here is the fundamental problem with Alternity's adversary systems. I'm bringing up these problems so that you guys know what to look for if you're DMing on what to keep and what to ditch, right? So the fundamental problem is, let me find it right here. Similar to New, it has very concrete ranges that a stat block is supposed to fall in order to equal their threat level from 1 to 13, where everything past 10 is supposed to be much more difficult for a level 10 party. So the problem lies in two things. One, these wounds, that didn't really help because it highlighted everything. These wound boxes, the threshold for checking a wound box, I don't want to go too much into the alternative mechanics, but basically, instead of using hit points, they use wound boxes where if you take a certain amount of damage past your soak, you check that box, right? And if your highest box gets checked, you're dead, dying, or otherwise. So they basically get built-in soak because their wound thresholds increase by 1 up until TR 10. Which means it's a lot harder to get heavier hits on them. At the same time, their damage is going up by 1 every 2 TR. So they are taking more damage and dealing more damage.
But not at a 1-for-1 rate. This is
well,
prioritizing.
Hang on. It gets worse.
Okay.
Because, unlike in 5th edition, player characters have a fixed wound threshold that never increases. Right here on screen, that chart. 1 to 3 is a graze, 4 to 6 is a light wound, etc. They'll get more boxes, potentially, if they take the right talents. But
And more soak.
Well, no, I'm going to get to that too. Their threshold for wounds is fixed from 1 to 20. Period. And their gear, the damage they deal, is based on their weapon. And it's fixed. And their soak is based on their armor. And it's fixed. So the things that the TR is increasing with level, because it's supposed to be 1-to-1, are not also being increased for players.
Yes, however, so your weapon is dealing fixed damage, but how does the success category affect that?
Still fixed.
So, because it's been a while since I looked at the gear. So, just say a blaster pistol does this amount for a normal success, a slightly increased amount for a good success, etc.
Yeah. So the way they do it is there's
okay.
3 levels of success: average, excellent, and stellar. If you get an average success, you deal the first number. So let's use plasma pistol, which is 2d4. So if you get an average success, you do 2d4 damage. If you get a excellent success, you use the second number. This is actually a bad example, but that's okay. We're not going too heavy into the mechanics of the system, just the mechanics of the monsters. Then the plasma pistol now does 2d8 with an excellent hit. And a stellar hit means if you deal a wound, you deal a second wound box of the same type.
Okay, that's you're doubling damage on crit.
Effectively, yeah.
Okay.
So, player lethality is more or less fixed. They get better accuracy as they level up, and they might get better combat options through talents, like the ability to attack multiple times, but the amount of damage they're dealing and the amount of damage they're able to take is static. Within some small variance, right? Because obviously they can get better gear. Yeah.
Right.
So having TR set to player level doesn't communicate. Because what this means is if you're using the way they present it, one standard of TR equal to a player level, is the higher level a player gets, the more likely they are to die.
Right. It's scaling difficulty without scaling competency to go with it.
Right. Now the thing is, threat rating as it's presented works. It just doesn't work as an encounter building mechanic. Because having a threat level from 1 to 13, just staring at it tells the GM, okay, this thing is on a scale from 1 to 13, it's 11 on that shit's gonna wreck your party. But in practice, that doesn't equate to encounter building. In fact, there really isn't a way to do encounter building with using TR, because my party, I had 2 first level characters fight a TR5 champion, and they shreked him. So it doesn't translate at all.
I mean, did that come down to just garbage design on the adversary, or luck rolls?
It was mostly rolls. Yeah, it was good rolls.
Okay,
but the thing is, they probably could. Well, also one of them built a munchkin, so he had the best armor you can get, the best weapons you can get, and as many hitboxes as you can get. And by the end of the encounter, he was like 1 hitbox away from being unconscious and dying. So it wasn't like an easy fight. But if 2 first level characters can defeat a TR5 then there's a TR5 champion. A champion is supposed to be worth two players of the same level. So that TR5 champion was supposed to be worth 2 5th level characters. It doesn't translate. Now I know in 5th edition you can also, especially if you have a paladin, fight punch up above your TR. But what I'm trying to say is that it comes down to TR to level is not compatible.
Does not compute.
So now that we've talked about game mechanics, because I really just had to get that off my chest.
Okay.
About Alternity. Oh, also, the Alternity put out the Xenologist Guide, which is supposed to have expanded rules for making monsters, and while expanded, it does not fix the issue. That's why I have my Xenologist Guide here. All right, so that's the more of tonight's topic. I wanted to start with it just because it's something that I needed to talk about.
Okay.
But now we could talk about more in practice. Unfortunately, I don't have something good to put on screen because I can't put D&D stuff up. So I'm just gonna leave the Alternity book up here. Maybe I'll pull up like a notepad and I can jot down notes. Nope, that wouldn't work either. I need a third monitor, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, you do.
So let's talk about encounters from a practical standpoint.
So I would like to start off by defining encounters.
Okay.
Because I don't know specifically your general outlook on what you would define as an encounter. I know what my outlook is on it, and I'm willing to bet it differs considerably. And that's going to very, very much inform our DM styles in how we approach encounter design. So I kind of wanted to lay that out there so we both know, and everyone watching and in the chat kind of knows where we're each coming from.
I think I know where you're trying to get to.
Okay.
So you want to go ahead and just start talking about it? Because I think you and I already know where we're going. So if you just want to get right
well,
into
we had discussed super brief before going on stream that, but I mean, there's a absolute like core quote unquote mission statement behind what I do, but it can also apply to yours. I use the classic 3 pillars of encounter design. Every encounter and I'm going to use this. I'm using D&D as my default pronoun here.
Okay.
Every encounter consists of either a combat element, an exploration element, or a social element, or any combination therein. Combat is the obvious. Roll your dice against the thing so that you can beat the thing before the thing beats you. That doesn't always necessitate swinging a sword at a monster.
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I didn't want to cut you off, but I'm prepared to pitch my counter proposal.
Okay. The exploration aspect has to do with your mysteries, your puzzles, your environment. How does, in the case of an actual combat, how does the battle map play a role in that encounter? And then the social element is the interacting with other players at the table, interacting with NPCs. Sometimes roles happen there, but that's not necessary for the social aspect of things. I personally abide by when I am designing an encounter, it has to include interesting facets of 2 of those pillars. And then the third pillar can either be outright ignored or play a minor role, but as soon as you try to go interesting on 3 of them, you are overburdening that encounter.
Okay.
And there is my definition of encounter building.
I have a okay. So you have social, environmental, or exploration and combat, which are the 3 pillars of D&D. I might add.
Right.
I have a question. Is there ever a time where it's not an encounter? Is it just encounters, downtime, and that's it?
No, everything is an encounter. So yes, I see where you're going there, but
I'm about to syndrome you.
No. And I see where you're going, and yes, valid point. But I'm the reason I bring that up is because it very much informs how I go about designing what I think you would define as an encounter.
Sure.
My definition of encounter is far broader, but it's that core mission statement tells me how I design what you would define as an encounter.
I have my own style, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. I'm not going to pretend like I am the end all be all of D&D, but I pretty much have combat encounters, and then the rest of the game.
Right.
So exploration and social encounters. Well, more social encounters than exploration. Social encounters just kind of have evolved naturally. The players want to talk to this NPC, we talk. And I try, especially for characters who built their characters with those skills, I try to allow for as many social roles as possible. I mean, my original game is Dragon Quest, made by I can't remember. SPI? Made by SPI from the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't even have any rules for social encounters. There's no social skills and none of that. It's just here's how you do combat. Here's how you do professional stuff. Go. So
pretty standard for early TTRPGs.
Yeah. So I did not get inundated in using social skills. It wasn't until I started playing Chronicles of Darkness where I'm like, oh, there's like an entire third of my character sheet that I need to find a way to use. I'm just gonna make everybody roll streetwise all the time. Okay. I think that's a great example of.
I mean, it's not wrong.
Of the 3 pillars, as Chronicles of Darkness literally divides your character sheet into the 3 pillars.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got your mental skills for the exploration.
Yep.
Your physical skills for your combat, and your social skills for your social. Yeah. Yeah, so mine's a little more ad hoc, a little more a la carte. And then obviously for 5th edition, I like to meticulously plan out my combat encounters to the point where sometimes I have to be like, everybody stop, I didn't know you were going to kill these people. And of course I like to have interesting maps and tactical placement and all that.
Well, and that's somewhere that you and I also differ, is that I very much do not meticulously plan combat encounters. I'm like, yeah, these monsters look good. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes your party decides to try to fight an adult cave dragon, and you're like, I guess that's what we're doing today.
Yeah.
Even though that was not planned.
I would like to point out as a player, though, and it's especially playing with Jaken as the DM, that I did not know I liked several levels and interesting things to consider when fighting enemies, like having archers spawn on ledges that you need to heavily climb or find a way around to get to them, or letting the archers and spellcasters reach. I did not understand I needed that in my life until that happened, and now if I'm a DM ever,
I think what Vegas was about to say, but I'm steamrolling him because that's my personality. is that goes into his idea of having 2 of the 3 pillars. That would be the exploration pillar of using athletics to climb, and yeah, I almost always have elevation in my encounters if I can justify it, or at least line of sight problems. I think that's like the most basic you can go of exploration is line of sight issues.
Right.
Yeah.
But it makes for a more interesting combat rather than I close the distance, I swing my sword, does it die?
Yep.
And I don't want to cast shade on any less experienced dungeon masters who are just laying out a square map and putting down pieces. That's how you learn the mechanics, and then you start experimenting.
You have to walk before you run.
I gotta be honest. Go ahead, Newguy. You haven't been talking.
I was gonna say, as a player, one thing that I really enjoy as well is that it can turn a monster that you've seen used several times. Like, let's say players are level 1 or 2 and they fight goblins. You're like, goblins, easy stuff. But one's on the ledge with a bow, and you're like, oh well, that's a big problem. So I like how it can turn a very silly creature that you've seen multiple times into, we got to deal with this.
Friggin' Tucker's kobolds.
Tucker's kobolds.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, I have to give props, and this may lose me some points. The thing that really taught me how to be creative with encounter building was actually 4th edition.
No, that I
mostly
I would
because
say that
4th edition was built like a video game.
Right, it's the world's slowest MMO.
Yeah, exactly. So that, I think it was really in 4th edition where I'm like, okay, I want them to fight a beholder, but instead of just putting a beholder on a square map, I want them to be fighting in a portal to the astral plane with floating platforms they have to jump to in order to reach the beholder, and then it went crazy from there.
Yep. Well, and that's to kind of jump on the do we hate 4E or do we not hate 4E train there. I think Wizards really dug into the 3 pillars,
the board game aspect.
Yeah. And even on the social side of it, they dug in a little too far. I personally think. I love skill challenges. I don't like how they were implemented in 4E to the point where it was role playing with 2 L's. And you never had to utter a single in-character word. Everything could be done with the dice.
4th edition is a great board game.
Yeah. I think it did very well on highlighting 3 pillars. It just didn't do so well executing once it had it highlighted.
But without 4th edition, we never would have gotten 5th edition, so it was all worth it.
Yep. Okay, so on then we've got our definitions of what an encounter is.
Mm-hmm.
What is when you sit down to design encounter X, what is the first thing that crosses your mind?
Well, I can only speak again to combat encounters because I don't view the rest of the game as encounters. I may have like a puzzle or traps that they have to overcome, but that's just instances for me.
Right.
So a combat encounter, the first thing is always, what are they fighting? I mean, that's going to be where you start with any combat encounter. I think if you don't know what you're fighting, you don't really have an encounter.
Okay.
Now, typically, what they are fighting is inextricably tied to why they are fighting. But if you're someone who likes to do random encounters, it may not matter as much. But I have grown out of random encounters. I don't think there's anything wrong with random encounters, especially if you're playing with players who really like combat.
Right.
But I just recently was playing Descent into Avernus, where the entire campaign felt like a random encounter, and it was not my cup of tea. But yeah, obviously, you want to pick what. And with 5th edition, the what is going to fall into a very narrow range of CR.
Right. I would say, for me personally, the first thing that crosses my mind is, rather than what are they fighting, how important, and again, I'm talking combat encounters here because that's what we're discussing at the moment. How important is this particular, like, how much do I want them to remember, or what is at stake, what's on the line? If it's the first encounter of like leading into a dungeon crawl, I can be less concerned with the minutia, like the every little detail doesn't always need to be outlined ahead of time, as long as I am setting appropriate expectations for the encounters to follow. Whereas if it is the big bad at the end of the dungeon, that's super important. So now I'm like, okay, I need to start focusing on minutia. I'm going to get much more detailed in what I'm preparing. Then after that for me is the what are they fighting? Now, a lot of times that what is already, because like you said, I tend to stray away from random encounters these days. So the what is kind of already, if it's not predetermined, it's going to be very easily informed by where in the storyline they are.
Right, yeah. If your
So,
party is hunting a bunch of drow, then you're going to have drow and drow associates.
right.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, but at that point, okay, so let's use that as an example. They're hunting drow, so okay, they're in the Underdark. All right, where are they in the Underdark? Oh, they just came into this wide open, massive cavern, and I want there to be a somewhat important fight in here. All right, it's going to be drow. It doesn't have to be drow.
That was going to bring me into step 2.
Okay.
Is diversifying your monsters, because I mean I'm guilty of this, because sometimes the story is just like, yeah, it's going to be 12 shark jaw skeletons and nothing but shark jaw skeletons.
Right.
But yeah, you definitely want, at any time you can get away with it in your story. Sometimes you can just be like, I don't know, they got a Tuyug. I don't care. Try to have different monsters, because every single stat block, generally speaking, I mean, if you throw in just a bunch of goblinoids, it's going to be a bunch of spanking tanks regardless. It's going to bring something new to the encounter. And also, once a party is like fighting a horde of goblins, after a while they kind of got a peg on. That's when they're like, I deal X damage, which means he's dead, and you're like, damn, he knows. You know?
Well, and that's the biggest thing. I was kind of saving this as a build up to, but that's a perfect point to bring in, like, my biggest point in this entire discussion, and then I'll touch on it again as we go. Never let the players peg down your encounter. As soon
I
as
disagree.
Because
I think once they do that, they've earned it, you know?
Yes and no. Okay, so not never. Always be prepared to throw a wrench in them pegging your encounters down. Because so let's say this is a combat encounter number 3 with the goblins, and they're like, okay, I just did 15 damage. That totally killed that guy because it did in the last 2 fights. You go, yeah, your character is like super confident on swinging in. You know this has him down, and it just looks back up at you with rage in its eyes as it rushes in for a renewed attack, and then they're like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah. If you have power gamers, though, that'll piss them off, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
That part.
I also
I do like.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I do like the idea of Vegas, because I feel like if you give them all the same stats, all the same HP, all the same thing, as Jaken says, it's the same. versus if you encounter this one kobold that's slightly more resilient than the others, it's kind of memorable. At least in my player's opinion, it's kind of memorable to be like, holy shit, like that kobold really wanted us dead. Like, look, he didn't go down like the rest of his.
And sometimes that happens by accident with dice rolls. Like, no one can hit this one kobold who's just a kobold, but everyone can't roll higher than a 10 to save their lives.
Well, and that's where I get a little willy-nilly with hit points.
I don't do that.
I absolutely do. You can go with the set hit points for the most part, but
the average.
If a player hits a monster and it would have 1 hit point left, but it's a dramatically appropriate moment for that particular monster to go down, in my game, that monster goes down.
Yeah.
If they've just tore through the average hit points for this monster, they're going on like 20 hit points over what it did, over what its hit point total is supposed to be, but the fight is still dramatically there, I will continue winging it. And if the monster stays alive for another round or two, and part of our discussion earlier was that about 3 rounds is average. Honestly, at my table, combat average is around 5 or 6 rounds. But that's for another reason that I'll bring up in a little bit. But part of it is because my monsters typically just have more hit points than the average, because there's dramatically appropriate times for a monster to fall, and that isn't always once you reach hit point max.
So as a player, I have a question for you, Vegas, because I like Jaken's system, and I feel like the way you DM would not go well with Jaken's system, where Jaken will tend to describe steps in the monster's HP. He's moderately wounded, he's almost dead, and so on and so forth, which gives the player some more control of, am I going all out to try and bring it down, or should I hold back a little, and so on and so forth. Like, I really enjoy Jaken's system of doing that. How do you deal with this? Because if a player goes all out thinking, I'm going to bring down this monster, it needs to go down now, and then he doesn't go down because for you, you're like, oh, he needs to go one more round. How do you deal with?
Spectacular question. And upon initial description, I can understand why that would be a concern. If I have, as a DM, if I have let description out that this monster, this adversary, is nearing its end, and a player like sitting there biting their nails, like sweat beading down their brow, and they're like, I need to go all out, I need to throw everything at it, and they throw everything at it, and it hits, and the narrative, what's happening, like they're putting it on the line to take this down. All right, that monster just went down because it's narratively appropriate at that point. So, and that could be 20 hit points after it already reached its hit point maximum, or it could be that they were picking up on cues that I wasn't intending to give out. Like, I said something that made them think it was much worse off than it actually was. And at that point, like, I'm always trying to stay very cognizant of what I have said. And if I can go, oh, they think it's almost dead. Okay, it's almost dead. Or, oh, they think it still has a long way to go. Let's give it a couple more rounds. I'm much less of a and Jaken, this is not intended as shade thrown your way. This is just a way to put it. I'm much less a slave to the numbers and much more a slave to the story when it comes to combat encounters.
I'm not offended at all. However, me being a, to use your term, slave to the numbers, is I like the fact, that's why I always roll above board now. I haven't rolled behind my DM screen, for lack of a better term, because mostly I play online. in years, because I think the beauty of role-playing games, and again, this isn't to throw shade at you in the other direction,
Right.
is that because we're all rolling dice, anything can happen. And so if you've been selling this, to use a real-world example, if you've been spending the last 5 levels building up this lich, and the party pancakes him on round 2, then the party pancakes him on round 2. That's just how I do things. And sometimes the kobold who no one can hit will escape and become a reoccurring villain just because no one can hit the kobold.
Yeah, and that's those are not. I'm not saying that those aren't viable outcomes.
Right, but I what I mean to say is my method is to let the dice have as much to do with the story as we, the players, because otherwise, why are we rolling them? But to your point, as someone who loves narrative-driven games, I don't think I'd be horribly opposed to your style.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's again, it's a matter of style. It's a matter of preference. I say all this in this is how I DM and this is the type of game I like to run. I love playing in Enfrost. I love playing D&D with you, because even though our DMing styles differ, yours works for you.
Right, yeah, exactly. Which is to me to say that there is no one way to do it, right?
Right.
There are definitely ways to do it wrong, though. New.
I'm looking at you, NEW.
And also, all this to say too is that DMs, as much as they have their own styles, also adapt to their own players. If
True.
you make yourself a group of players that enjoy your DMing style, then so be it. But I'm sure that if Vegas ended up at the table being the DM and the players don't seem to like his style, he would adapt it a little bit more so that his players have more fun. And same with you, Jim.
And to pivot the topic into that a little bit, just briefly, I may just be an arrogant douche, and I totally will own that. But
Good talk, that's it.
People are always saying, like, always talk to your players and adjust your game. But I'm like, nah. If my players aren't having fun, they can get lost. I'll find people that will have fun.
Well,
but I've also been DMing for 18 years, and I know what I like. So there's that.
Yeah. So yeah, I would both agree and disagree. With that.
I'm saying with the caveat that I'm an asshole. Like, caveat, Jaken's an asshole.
Well, and I've got my, just for 5e explicitly, my DMing background is Adventurers League.
Right, where you don't have a whole lot of say on who you play with.
And there were months spans at a time where I had the exact same table. And then I would get 2 months where I didn't have a single player at my table that was a repeat.
Right.
And that's just for like one location. I DM'd multiple locations, multiple game stores. So yes, Newguy. I personally very much adjust to the table. Well, I'm just talking about my preferred style.
Yeah.
If I'm putting together a group, I'm going to be looking specifically for a group of players that is going to be on board with a little bit of willy-nilly, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey nonsense.
Yeah.
In service to the overall narrative.
Right. I think we're all picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Vegas, what constitutes in your method a social and or environmental encounter or exploration encounter? Because I never think of a conversation with an NPC as an encounter, because sometimes the players have an objective. Well, surprisingly, almost every time a player talks to an NPC, they have an objective. So I can get how that makes it an encounter in itself, like ostensively.
So, yes.
But I never think... There are a few instances where I feel like it's a win-lose, kind of.
Well, and that's where the social encounter definition comes in. I do a lot with my NPCs on the players can come with an objective, or they can strike up a random conversation. My NPCs almost always have an objective in an interaction with the players. So this treads slightly into DM versus player ground for a lot of people's perspective, and
I don't think so, but yeah, go on ahead.
but I will when I have this NPC has a bit of information that the players either actively want or they're going to want if they know about it. Now, is this NPC trying to impart this information to the player, to the party, or is he trying to keep it from the party? And I will role play the NPC accordingly. Obviously, if they're trying to impart it, then they're going to tell them.
Right. You're going to exposit all over them.
Right. Well, and I try to keep the exposition to a minimum, but it happens.
Yeah.
But if they're trying to keep it from them, then that's going to put a whole different spin on how they're going to approach this interaction. And at that point, I'm going to intentionally describe the environment around them in a specific way to set the mood that you're okay. I'll use a real, or not a real world, but a practical example. Your party is trying to get the location of the MacGuffin, and they know that someone at this tavern has an idea where the MacGuffin is. So they go into the tavern, and it's a D&D tavern. Everyone that's played D&D knows what a D&D tavern is.
It's the cantina scene from New Hope.
Right. It's the cantina scene from New Hope.
It's always the cantina scene from New Hope.
Except in this particular case, because I know my party is coming in expressly looking for this bit of information, but they don't know specifically who has it, I am going to play up in my description of this tavern that you hear the expected sounds as you enter. You've got the banging of cups on tables. You've got feet shuffling across the floor as servers move from booth to booth. You've got the dull roar of innumerable conversations. Over by the fireplace, there's three clearly off-duty town guards, and they're living it up, and they're laughing, and they're having a good time. And then as your eyes pan across the room, the light from the fire dims quicker than you would expect, and there's shadows playing off the walls, and no one's face is quite in focus. There's a haze hanging low over the entire place, as the smoke going up the flue isn't quite catching. So what I'm doing is I'm setting the mood, I'm setting the feeling of paranoia, of you don't know who to trust. Yeah, I'm setting it noir.
Yeah.
So that they're going to, at that point, they're going to immediately be suspicious of everyone that they talk to, even though there's probably only one person in there to be suspicious of. So they're going to be asking to make insight rolls. They're going to be asking to make perception rolls. They're going to, and deception and intimidate. I'm setting the mood for them to want to involve their dice in an otherwise diceless encounter. So that's what I would do for a social encounter.
So you set the scene, you set the NPC's goals. I mean, that's very similar to how I run social encounters, although I never think of them as that. Whenever I have an NPC that the players are going to talk to, I have a box, a metaphorical box. I put in to the box everything I know about this character, which means, like, if I put into the box, this character is loyal to the king to his death, then there's never going to be a moment where he'll betray the king. However, I only put things in the box if it's A, if the NPC is important enough, or B, if the NPC is going to be reoccurring enough for all of this information to matter. So if they just want to talk to a random guy that I just came up with the last scene because somebody wanted to be redirected to somewhere, I'm like, Steve the guy at the bar. Then I probably won't put anything in the box. And for everything that isn't in the box, whenever one of the players touches on something that isn't directly in the box, then I'll be like, okay, skill roll. And then I also, once that skill roll resolves, based on how the players rolled, I make that precedent, right? So if you want to persuade someone of something and you're offering something that isn't in the box, I'll be like, okay, give me a persuasion roll. And if you fail, I will then add to the box. Or if you succeed, I will then add to the box. Like, he can be bought this way, or he can be persuaded this way, or he cannot be persuaded this way.
Right.
And that's how I handle my NPC interactions. There's just kind of like this mental box in my head of everything. Like in Enfrost, every major named NPC had a box, right? Including Tiad.
Right.
Yeah, and as you interact with them, if you're dealing with the box, there's no rolls. But the minute you step out of the box, I'm like, okay, give me an X roll, depending on how you're interacting with them, and then I add to the box there. And I suspect my method means that social skills get used less, but that's kind of my style. But if someone has like a lot like expertise in persuasion or deception, I will throw less things in the box just so they have a chance to roll within reason, you know?
Yeah, that's an interesting approach to it. I like that.
I think that was me adapting my old school method of like Dragon Quest, where everything was in the box basically, because there were no social roles, to like, oh, now I have social roles. How do I justify my old style to let people make rolls? Yeah.
Well, and that's
and again, I don't fill the box with the life story of the character. I just get hallmarks of the character that makes him this character. Like Yofer. I don't know if everyone watching watches Enfrost, but Yofer, he had a box, and there were times where you guys played outside his box. But most of the time he was in box, because he was a very defined character who had a very specific role in the campaign. So he stuck to his box.
Right.
That's one way to go, Blinky, is to, if they're dealing with something in the box, you can adjust the DC. But then there are characters who could never, like where you have ultimatums, like, he will never betray his god. Then it doesn't matter if they roll a 30 on their persuasion check. If that's in the box, no luck.
Well, let's see. So
that's why I never call for a roll unless they can succeed.
Oh, see, and I'm completely the opposite. Let's use NPC example of will never betray their god, and they attempt to get this NPC to betray their god.
It's a dumb example, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. They're never going to betray their employer.
Yeah.
Never going to do it. However, an attempt is made. A roll is going to happen. And typically, I'm not going to define what the role is. I'm going to ask the player how based, or I'll lead them, but I'm going to let them basically pick what role they're going for. And that means that their better roles get used more often, and that's fine. But if you came at him with, if you don't betray your employer, I'm going to murder you on the spot. So it sounds like you're trying to intimidate him. Am I picking that up correctly?
No, I'm lying, because I'm not going to kill him. Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean,
it's still intimidation.
That's
but
still
go
intimidation.
Ahead.
But at that point, even if the roll isn't going to fail or isn't going to succeed, there's no way that roll succeeds. what they roll is going to determine the attitude of the reaction from the NPC for me. If you're never going to betray your employer and someone intimidates you and they roll really low, then they're going to just no, you're an asshole and I'm not talking to you anymore because you think you can come in here and just bully your way around. No, we're done. Get the fuck out of my bar.
Yeah, I think
or I was say, or if they rolled really well, it's going to be one of those, look, I don't want any trouble. I can't give you this information. I can't do it. I can't do what you're asking me to do. Please understand where I'm coming from. I really don't want this to become. And so, yeah, it's.
I do want to say that sometimes using my model, there is no box. For example, in Enfrost, when you guys captured the spawn of the red werewolf, I forgot what they're called, he didn't have a box. I was just like, he doesn't want to tell them the information. That's the box, but that doesn't mean he won't ever. So that's why that whole encounter was just, now I'm using encounter because it is really an encounter. Was roll after roll after roll, influenced by roleplay. Where eventually they blighted the hell out of him.
Crossbow bolts under the fingernails and blight.
Yeah, he told them everything.
Well, yeah, yeah, he did.
So that was an instance where I'm like, I don't want to have whenever, I think, unless they're interrogating a long-standing NPC, whenever there's an interrogation, I kind of throw the box out, because I want to let them roll for that. Now, you brought up something interesting, which makes me want to pivot to gushing more like about, well, perhaps this could be a discussion unto itself, about alternity. Because many systems have tried to do something akin to social combat. Systems I'm referring to are like Mouse Guard and Fate, but often they just have like one catch-all conflict resolution system, and you can plug in whatever you want. So it's not really a social combat because it's also combat and it works the same. However, though, Fate and Mouse Guard, great systems, recommended. Alternity has stuff about has an interaction system specifically. I don't know if you're looking at the stream now. Specifically about NPC attitude and how you can influence that attitude with dice rolls. I think that works great because you can put in the box, this guy's hostile. Then the game says, okay, he's hostile. This is what the players have to achieve with their rolls to change that to not being hostile. I think that's a great method because it puts more power back into the dice for someone like me who isn't comfortable with social checks, but also lets me define it in in-game box. I don't know if you're looking at the stream right now. I don't know how behind it is. But here's just kind of like the page. I know it's just one. Yeah, it's pretty much the whole page of like NPC attitude, set it, and then the roles can influence it. And I think this is really handy. What I love about the reason why I love diving into systems, even if I'll never play them, is because sometimes you get something like this, which you can just rip and plug into anything you want, if it helps you. If it helps you, you don't want to bog down the game with too much rules.
Well, and touching back then on D&D 5th edition is a good example of they tried to do this and it just does not translate in how they did it. Whereas if you take the alternity, obviously some tweaking because skill checks are handled slightly differently.
Right. Because there's 3 success tiers. Yeah.
Right.
Well, you just change it to DC, but yeah.
Yeah, you exactly. Well, and D&D has a way of doing that. Like, here's the DC, and this you see this a lot in some of their canned adventures. Here's the DC for this thing that they're trying to do. If they roll it, they get it. If they exceed the DC by 5 or more, this extra thing happens.
So they kind of. I think I just spit all over my microphone. They kind of bake in success levels.
Right. Yeah. But that's not explicitly in the rule set.
Right.
But it can be tweaked for D&D, where I agree. This method of handling changing an NPC's attitude with dice is wonderful. I try to avoid codifying
this
a change
level
in
of
attitude.
this level of
right.
mechanics.
But it's spectacular for a system that is delineated for that. This is, in my opinion, that's how it's done.
I probably wouldn't use this all the time, but in instances where because the great thing about Alternity is like everybody's at least capable of doing everything, right? I don't want to dive too heavy into the system without eating up too much time off the main topic. So even your Munchkin battle characters are going to have a fairly decent ability to interact with any element of the game, including, but not limited to, talking to NPCs. So this is a great way to just, like you said, codify it when you need to do that. Yeah. Again, I wouldn't use this all the time, but if it helped the box and it allowed players, especially social characters, to roll their social skills more, then I would start using this as often as it made sense.
Yeah. So a follow-up question to what led us here on the how would I define a social encounter? And that your definition of encounters is typically combat, and then you specifically mentioned puzzles, traps, mysteries.
That's how I would quantify that as exploration.
Right. So for you, how do you go about? And I know, having played with you for a long time now, I think I know the answer to this, but I kind of want to delve into it just to get a deeper look. And for viewers, how do you go about when you do include a trap or a puzzle that isn't explicitly tied to combat? How do you go about designing that?
Well, I often give exploration encounters another shot, but I typically, and this may be heresy, I typically find exploration encounters to be a waste of time. Don't at me.
Okay.
It's, for me, I'm much more interested in character stories. And there's nothing interesting about climbing a rock face generally. There's nothing interesting about dodging a pit trap generally.
Okay.
I keep trying to add them into my game, and for me, I can't speak to my players. I haven't directly asked them, although obviously from Fire and Blade, puzzles are not my forte. They just feel like filler to me. Now, if the adventure was like an Indiana Jones kind of the opening act of Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of situation, then I could have a lot of fun with that if it was narratively satisfying. But on a whole, that's not usually the stories I run, and maybe that's my own fallacy, but we all have our strengths and weaknesses. I don't care. I prefer mystery over puzzles and traps. I like intrigue and mystery, and I'm not great at mysteries, but the great benefit of being the dungeon master is I control the flow of information, so it's quite easy to, if done well, to kind of tug players along. Oh, you guys lost 7 hours to try to figure out a puzzle? See, yeah, my character's only lost 4. I'm winning.
Right. Well, okay, so
so that's my unpopular opinion. I'm gonna throw it out. That's my hot take. Is I know it's one of the 3 pillars of D&D, but I don't do it. I don't do it.
Okay. I
do try to sometimes put environmental / traps in combat encounters as a way to mix things up.
And that's, yes, That's just a big yes.
Right, but typically traps in dungeons are just like a health tax.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was going to touch on is that
HP toll. You failed your roll. Now pay the toll. Yeah.
Yeah. That's I am not a fan of the traditional a dungeon crawl involves combat, pause,
Traps.
trap, pause, puzzle, pause. And this delves back into my when building an encounter, it has to feature something interesting from two of the pillars.
Right.
If you're going to have a trap, you have to tie it into typically a combat, but there are ways to tie it into a social encounter as well. That's a little more difficult, but it can be done. If you're going to have a puzzle, you have to tie it into a combat or a social encounter. Now, I would like to use a cinematic example of something specific that you mentioned that and segueing into always include two pillars. There is nothing interesting about scaling a wall.
Yeah, you paused, so I'm jumping in.
Go ahead.
One of my favorite movies is Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, and there's a part where Kirk and McCoy have to scale a wall, and then they just cut to them being at the top of the wall because it's that boring.
Okay. Okay. I counter that very poor writing.
Wow.
Because that's no. I'm using that specific scene. That is poor writing. Because
they didn't present it in the story as a challenge, but yes.
Well, scaling a wall can be interesting and can be one of the best scenes of a much beloved piece of cinema. Princess Bride.
Yeah, but was it really the act of scaling the wall that was interesting, or was it the way the characters reacted to a character scaling a wall?
Well, the writing of it focused primarily on the social pillar of that encounter.
Right.
However, there absolutely was the exploration pillar. There was the challenge there because, one, he was exhausted from doing it. It was a physical challenge for him to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
The adversary at the top of the wall at one point throws down the rope for him to help. Then that relieved a bit of that physical challenge tension while replacing it with social tension and impending combat tension.
I think anyone who wants to learn how to build an adventure should just watch Princess Bride.
Agreed.
Oh my god.
That is it absolutely is. It is just a master class on building a D&D adventure.
It is hard because the villains become the party members halfway through. But yeah, other than that,
it is. But that is an example of evolving NPC motivations, evolving NPC loyalties. That it is a master class. It also does a spectacular job of condensing hero's journey.
Mm-hmm. Also, it really has a great example using Indigo of making a villain that isn't villainous, but the party still has to overcome. When Indigo is incredibly polite to what he believes to be Dread Pirate Roberts, and allow him to take the rocks out of his boots and let him get comfortable before they fight. If you bake that into a villain, it can really throw the party for a loop and lead to some awesome interactions.
Yeah. And then and this is again tying into, well, but the adversaries become party members halfway through, but that also is a prime example of appropriate and how do I word this? Appropriate, predictable, yet still satisfying character development in Inigo.
So let's
In the,
let's tear down that scene as an encounter.
okay.
We start.
It's so good.
Right. We start with the rope. Right. There's a rope that extends the length of the cliff, and their giant is carrying the rest of the villains and the objective, which is the princess,
Right.
up this rope. They're being pursued by our PC, who is Wesley, aka Dread Pirate Roberts. So obviously, that's a bit of a chase scene where the player character is closing the gap through athletics checks, right? Like, I think we can... If we're playing this like D&D, like, okay, they've got a leg up on you, roll athletics. Is that like a granular kind of success, or you like... You need a 15 to keep up with them. If you get a little bit higher, you start gaining on them. That doesn't really work in the core presentation of D&D.
Agreed. And this is where you have to wibbly wobbly timey wimey. You gotta mess with it.
Without messing with it though, that's an athletics check.
Okay.
That's an athletics check. Here's the DC. If you fail,
you lose ground.
And if you succeed, you keep up with them for the sake of the scene, right? Because that's how it's going to go.
Right.
All right. So then the villains reach the top before you, which was kind of predetermined based on the roll we just proposed.
Right.
And then our main villain cuts the rope. Okay, now you got to give me another check to grab onto the wall before you fall. A dex save, probably.
Right.
If you fail the dex save, you're going to plummet on some feet before you can attempt it again. And if you fail X amount of times, you're dead. You just hit the bottom. Well, you're not dead. It's D&D. You take 1d6 per every 10 feet you fall, and you're probably fine.
Right.
Because D&D. But anyway, you succeed your dex save. You're now on the wall. Okay? You need to make an athletics check to scale the wall.
Right. And now this is the DC has gone up, and you no longer have advantage on your athletics check
because you don't have a rope.
Because you no longer have the rope. So you've taken this encounter that was otherwise a boring climb the rope encounter, and you have now scaled up the tension, and there are legit concerns for your health point pool, your HP pool.
Okay. So far, I'm with you. This works.
Okay.
So now we get to this next athletics check. If you fail, you don't climb, and if you succeed, you get to the top.
Yeah, and this is where I would take a page out of the canned adventures. Your DC is 15. If you fail, you don't make any progress. If you roll a 5 or lower, you lose your grip. If you roll a 20 or higher, you manage to find the right handholds, you manage to balance your weight just right, and you get up you get up quicker than you had intended.
Okay. Now, where it kind of breaks down is because we're using this example from a movie, right? So in this encounter, you have a swordsman waiting for you at the top.
Right.
In the movie, effectively, Wesley fails his athletics check, and the swashbuckler stat block waiting for him throws him down a rope to get him up there, and then then the exploration ends. So all of
that aspect of the exploration ends.
Is the other aspect the very multi-tiered battle map? You know what the problem with 5th edition is? Once you get adjacent to a character, you're not really going to move. You're never going to have the Indigo versus Wesley sword fight in 5th edition because there's no point to shove or disengage when you can just attack.
We've proven you wrong several times during Antro.
Yeah, I reckon you guys might, depending how close the ledge is, you might try to ledge them. But other than that, I mean, there's no benefit to elevation in melee combat.
Yeah, there's no statistical benefit to elevation in melee combat. Now this, I'll use the, for lack of a better term, the bear bomb as an example here. The assassin bear. Not necessarily elevation, but positioning absolutely played a role in us just assing all over that guy more than we should have.
Which guy?
The bear assassin.
The bear assassin.
Yeah, positioning helped a lot, especially because you got your taunt off.
Exactly. Well, and that was that was just a coordinated effort of let's get him. Well, it wasn't a let's get him here. It was he's coming here, and then as soon as he got there, knowing that the NPC combatants were going to come in and kind of surround him, and then Kulu was kind of just peppering him, and I got my taunt off, and I managed to knock him prone, and
lots of things played.
So positioning can be important. It isn't always obviously important, but it can become important, and I think that's where we as DMs need to lead by example.
I just don't think it works for 5th edition. Like a game like Fate, where there is no map and you can narrate things and you can roll to gain an advantage and all that, would play that scene better.
Agreed, but that scene could absolutely be played in 5th edition, with some. I mean, obviously there's some acrobatics checks in there. There's some athletics checks in there. There were attacks of opportunity that happened in there. There were some disengages that happened.
And there was there was one scene where I don't remember which one. I think Wesley threw Indigo into a wall. Using the environment to do damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that. That's where
I'm gonna go watch
stand.
That movie now. Stream over.
Bye, guys. It's been nice. No, I think that's our in a very by the book combat encounter. That would never happen.
Right.
In a
very meticulously crafted cinematic encounter.
Well, and not even meticulously. An encounter like that can absolutely be spontaneous. There was another game that I'm playing in. We had as part of a very new DM. Like this was the 4th session that this DM was running, and I had been slightly mentoring said DM. They came to me for advice.
Chad, if this line of thought isn't working for y'all, let us know because we're just gonna keep going.
And she took the let's put 2 pillars of the 3 in every encounter, and so she built I want this encounter to happen at this point in the session, and I know that these are the baddies I'm going to have in it, and they're going to be essentially they're just giant tentacles. You don't know what they're attached to. It's underwater, and there's a river. there's and then there's a river, and there's no obvious way to cross the river. And her intent was using the challenge, the tension set by there being a river. Her intent was half of the party was going to get across the river, and then the encounter started. And then we were going to find out, oh God, there's some sort of giant tentacle monster thingy in the water. And we were going to be split 50 feet apart with a river in between us. Well,
sounds like a good encounter.
Right. And it got even better because spontaneous things happened. Our wizard had just picked up, I want to say it's a cantrip, Shape Earth. And was taking chunks of dirt from our side of the river and dropping it into the river and building up pillars spaced 5 feet apart so that we could just hop across the river. So we all stayed on that side, and the wizard just built those pillars up. And meanwhile, the DM's going, oh God, what do I do? They're all going to get across at roughly the same time. So she just initiated the encounter as we were all in the middle of the river, each standing on our own 5-foot island.
And unable to move without another person moving.
Exactly. So it turned into a very interesting, very tense encounter. And then our druid jumped into the water, shifted into a crocodile, was like, okay, now we've got some water movement going on. That's great. And then our wizard, just being
a wizard,
creative, and quite frankly, our DM forgetting the rule of no, you can't use 2 spell slots in the same turn.
Actually, you can if you action surge.
Yes, but for a pure wizard, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So she jumps out over the water to get the right positioning. Mid-air shoots off Agnazar's Scorcher to flamethrower multiple tentacles, and then Misty steps over on top of the crocodile so that she doesn't fall into the fast-moving water of the river. And
it's a shame that's not in the core mechanics. That's dope.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So an otherwise well-built encounter that it was well-built, a little cliche, but still interesting.
I mean,
and
I would play the hell out of that encounter. Yeah.
But then it turned into a very spontaneous, very acrobatic, and now 2 pillars have opened up. So now we've got a little bit more room to move around. And then our paladin gets grappled, or our cleric gets grappled, gets pulled out over the water. So the bard casts heat metal on the cleric's armor, so that the tentacle has to drop. But in that time, managed to communicate, and the crocodile with the wizard on his back manages to get over and catch the cleric as the tentacle drops. It turned into a very spontaneous, very movement intense.
Okay.
Where are we going to move? How's it going to work?
That
it can be done.
Is a perfect example of a moving encounter with lots of movement in it. But the example of the 2 swordsmen on a multi-tiered ruin in the movie, it's very obviously that these 2 swordsmen are of equal, or at least very, very close skill. So the reason they were constantly repositioning was in an attempt to get that little edge over their opponent to give them victory. And there was also, if we are equally skilled swordsmen, we could also tire the other one out by climbing this flight of stairs, and hopefully I have better stamina than them. So there was a lot of things that don't translate to game mechanics going on in that sequence of events. Unless you're playing Fate, because fucking Fate's great.
Agreed. But again, that's where I say we have to lead by example as DMs. Yes, that fight in 5e can just be you stand toe-to-toe the entire time and whoever rolls better wins. Or
Or the player can say, can I attempt an acrobatic leap up these stairs to gain advantage on my next attack? And you can be like, sure, yeah, roll it. But if you fail, you give advantage to your opponent.
Or let's say 2 rounds go by and that hasn't happened. As a DM, in order to make things more interesting, it is now my responsibility because the player hasn't done anything. I'm going to say, all right, so your opponent, the mysterious swordsman with a thirst for revenge, spins to his left and steps out of your threat range. Would you like an attack of opportunity? And players like, okay, why is he disengaged? Why is he moving? Do you want you? So you take your attack of opportunity, and then I say, all right. And then in a flourish of acrobatic prowess, flips up, does a handspring, lands up there, and says, "Don't do it, Anakin. I have the high ground." And he clearly has it. He clearly has attained an advantageous position. I've just given the player the clue that, oh, he just got advantage by doing that. All right, let me close that gap so that he either doesn't get his advantage or I can do something cool next turn. It's as DM, it's our job to, if our initial setup isn't obvious and isn't increasing the tension or the fun, we need to push that narrative, push that idea to the player so that they pick up the reins and just ride.
You mentioned Anakin versus Obi-Wan, and I think we can all agree that fight went on way too goddamn long, but...
Yeah, it did. Yeah, that was clearly like a 12-round fight, and that should never happen.
An on-the-spot way to make 1v1 duels, and I kind of wish I had thought of this, because we had a lot of 1v1 duels in Enfrost. But generally speaking, those were done in the square, so there really wasn't a lot of maneuver anyway. But if you have a setup like the Mustafar base, you can have a lot of objects that can be interacted with, like slamming your opponent into an electrified console. Could send sparks flying and cause damage. You could have an on-the-spot 4 duels only rule that if you succeed in an attack roll, you push your enemy and you step into that space. And so there's a literal give and take of movement, and to the advantage of there are objects that you've placed. Obviously, you'd have to articulate to this player, like, if this does this, and this does this, and there's a lava pit over here, where you can literally try to push them towards an environmental thing. But again, that would be, for lack of a better term, that'd be breaking the rules, because you're adding a new level of movement. I think that'd be really cool if you're trying to set up like an Anakin versus Obi-Wan type of big climactic fight.
Well,
and then the other 3 players are like, here we go.
Well, if you're setting it up as a one-on-one duel, yes.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily want to go too overboard for risking losing the engagement of the other players.
Yeah.
But
that's another reason to keep one-on-ones very, very succinct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Blinky, I see what you said, and I want to talk about it, but we're currently in a thought. So,
to touch on the well, now you're breaking the rules. Again,
rule of cool.
One rule of cool, but 2, let's say you have set the expectation with your table that you are running a raw game, rules as written. There is a way to do that and to do the maneuvering your opponent towards an environmental danger without breaking the rules, rather than the ad hoc, okay, if you successfully hit, you push them and move into their space. Set it up with the NPC, with the adversary, that
they have an ability.
Not that they have an ability. No, make it even playing ground. They forego their attack in order to shove you 5 feet back. They're maneuvering you.
And once they shove you into your first console, that you're like, oh, he was doing this for a reason. That hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And then they're going to turn around and look for opportunities to do the same.
And that would also really work well at higher levels of 5th edition, where you have so much hit points. Where taking 1d8 plus 5, you're like, okay, but then you get slammed into a console and you take 4d8 lightning, you're like, oh, that changes the game. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of my philosophy on high level play to begin with, is because the hit point pools are so big at that point, you have to do interesting things. You have to mix things up, because if you don't, it just becomes a war of attrition.
And so Blinky said in the comments, my first campaign as DM will be totally broken because I'll just change the rules I don't think are as fun as they could be and break the balance. I will say this first. There's no wrong way to play D&D, but also don't do that. Within reason. I think once you understand the rules of a system is when you can truly break them to your liking, but not before.
Yeah, my advice would fall similar. I would agree. Don't break the rules. Learn how far you can bend them.
No. Go ahead and break the rules, but you need to understand why you're breaking the rules.
Well, no, early on.
Right.
Don't start off by bending them and saying, okay, that was a really cool maneuver. And one of my favorites is because 5th edition has inspiration. Grant, I like to call it limited inspiration, and it's it's basically that thing you just did was really cool. As a result, you can either have advantage on your next attack or advantage on your next saving throw that you are pretty sure is coming, your choice. And you're giving them inspiration, but then you're also kind of forcing them to choose to use it right away. And you keep that separate of your normal inspiration you reserve to use whenever you want.
We could have a big talk about inspiration and about how clunky it is, because you can only have one, so it's supposed to be an encouragement for the players to just use it. But then players are like, I gotta save my inspiration for that one moment. You're like, I'd like to give you inspiration, but you already have your one. So that might be a cool thing.
I'm absolutely on the same page with you on that. It's just, as a player, I forget that I have it.
Right.
When I remember I have it, I use it almost immediately.
Right. Yeah. I will say though.
Player,
oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, as a player, I have the problem of playing RPGs. So, for example, The Witcher, I don't think I've ever used a potion that dropped, or an oil that dropped, or anything that dropped, or it's always like, it can be better used later.
Well, Witcher's a bad example because your oils and potions you have forever.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, like, I'm an idiot because, like, I have all these cool things,
all these consumables
in D&D, but I'm like, it can be used a little bit later, and I end up not using it.
Yeah, you end the game with 15 fire resistance potions because you never know if this is the fight where you really need it. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. I mean, he's only doing a third of my health with his fire attack. I can take that. Let's hold off.
Yeah. 2/5 is where I'm drawing the line. No, I actually, now that I've said it out loud, I kind of want to throw in a tug of war homebrew where every successful melee attack advances your character one. I don't know if that'll work in 5th edition, but I might put that in Alternity.
That's...
Again, it requires playtest. But now I'm like
discussion. I would honestly, I mean, just super briefly, I would say yes, but that particular attack costs 1 additional initiative impulse.
Make it an action modifier
to accomplish that. Yeah,
a pressing attack
to accomplish that.
Yeah, I like that.
Exactly.
Cool. That was yeah. No, I wanted to go back to something, but I forgot now. Because I thought about the tug of war mechanic. I'm like, that's neat. Now I don't know what I was gonna go back to. I guess I'll go back to we're kind of in the realm of mobile combat encounters, but I back when we were talking about steps, which we abandoned, we got to step 2 and then we forgot about it. Step 3, because step 1 is what are we fighting / why are we fighting. That's yes. Both step 1. Step 2 is diversify your monster pool within reason, because I use physical books, so sometimes I'm like, 8 different monsters. That's great. And then I'm like, oh fuck. Which book is that in?
Flip.
Although my wife made me this awesome bookmark that I use that makes it so much easier. It's color coded, so I'm like, yellow is goblin, brown is bugbear.
Oh yeah, those little post-it note sticky arrows are beautiful.
This is what my wife made. It's very basic. I don't know how well it's coming across on camera, but it's basically just thread of different color on a flat bookmark. This goes on the back, and you grab the thread you want.
Yep.
You put it on the page, and it's all color coded, and it makes it really easy to remember what's what.
Yeah,
especially since monster manuals are in alphabetical order, so you're just like B comes before C. I'll go to that one.
The patented Dire Roll Monster Manual bookmark will be on sale on Etsy.
My wife
soon.
has an Etsy. I don't know how much she would charge for that because it's really bare bones. She'll charge you shipping plus $1. No, I don't want to put her up to that. She's typing in chat right now, furiously tapping away.
There you go.
Damn, there you guys go. At Alenia.
You heard it here. Dire Roll merch shop coming soon.
Oof! Don't put that on me. I'm having a hard time running a stream. Oh, okay. One encounter, and I know Newguy's gonna have opinions about it. My party. You know, I really don't even know how. I forgot. But no, I remember now. Okay. My party was localized around a city, not as heavily as Suderhoffen, but a similar kind of like this is your home base when you're done with adventures. Well, one time they got back from an adventure, and a crazy 7 Deadly Sins cult had taken over a swath of the city, and it was basically just, for you Magic the Gathering players, it was basically just Rakdos all up in there. And they were like, we don't like that, we're going to put a stop to it. And they eventually found the reason was that these devils were taking people to hell as slave labor, / stealing their souls. So they went into hell to put a stop to that. And they were rough, I want to say they were 15th level, maybe a little earlier. Let's say around 15th level. Anyway, enter the Pit Fiend. This is the first time I ever got to play a Pit Fiend. And I knew the encounter was going to be, oh, the Pit Fiend has at-will fireball. I guess he'll never land. So I looked at my party composition and I said, we got a ranger, no, we got a rogue with some ranger levels, who's mostly a ranged rogue, right? We've got at the time, we had a warlock, but the warlock was preferred to be in melee combat, but of course had Eldritch Blast to fall back on. I think we had a sorcerer at that point as well, and then we had a paladin and a monk, who were both entirely melee, right? So when I built the environment, so this is step 3, your environment, I'm like, I need the players who aren't ranged capable to be able to shoot back. And actually, I inadvertently made this a exploration aspect to the encounter. There was a tower in the middle of this fight with a ballista on top, and so if they scaled the tower, they could operate the ballista and shoot at the Pit Fiend. Well, that was cool until the paladin just gave up, and it was a party wipe because the paladin gave up against a fiend. So the Pit Fiend pancaked the entire party, and that was my that was my second party wipe of my 1 to 20 campaign.
So okay, from an encounter design perspective, that's spectacular. Yeah. It's a very well designed encounter.
I also made the ballista a Hellforge ballista, so it was entirely made out of flame resistant material, so that he couldn't just fireball at the minute they tried to use it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. From an encounter design standpoint, very well designed encounter.
I don't know if very well, but definitely thought. I thought through it.
No, that's like you said about the river encounter. I would play the shit out of that encounter. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Sorry, I got kid aggro.
That's okay.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's
the fact that it didn't pan out has nothing to do with the encounter design. That just has to do with lack of engagement from players.
Specifically, the one who is most suited to hurt the. Yeah.
Right. So, no, that's a great encounter. Like there's nothing wrong with that. That's a very good example of encompassing the two pillars. I'd like to segue a tiny bit there because you mentioned specifically, Pit Fiend has at-will fireball. Why would it ever land?
Yeah. Especially in its
Agreed.
own home turf. Yeah.
Agreed. But if a tactical advantage like that is going to cause you to have to rethink major aspects of your encounter design, start digging into the adversary's motivations, desires, etc. A Pit Fiend, yes, can absolutely fireball from range, but it's a devil, and it is 100% going to revel in physically dominating its opponents. Can it stay up aloft and lob fireballs? Yes, but that would be cowardly, and a Pit Fiend would never do that. Now, granted.
In fact, in the encounter, which again was a TPK, I say TPK, but not everyone died, because the whole purpose of this camp that they were invading was to take slaves. So the survivors got taken into slavery. Great. At one point, he did land in order to get personal, because that again, Pit Fiend. Yeah.
And as an example, I'm going to drop this in chat briefly. I don't even need to. www.themonstersknow.com. This is a spectacular resource.
Oh, sorry.
For encounter design.
It's not porn.
It is not porn.
It was don't ban me. Don't ban me, Twitch. Don't ban me, Twitch.
No, this is a wonderful resource for encounter design, especially if you're dealing with a monster that you've never run before or has at-will fireball. There's two sections to it. There's the DM section, and then there's the PC section. There's combat tactics for DMs. The monsters know what they're doing, and combat tactics for PCs live to tell the tale. It just deep dives into different monsters from Monster Manual and other supplements, and deep dives into their motivations, their desires, how they like to fight, and how to use them both or efficiently, effectively, and stylistically. And sometimes those three don't always mesh, but it makes the encounter more interesting. It makes the encounter more memorable, because you're like, man, that Pit Fiend had at-will fireball. It could have just stayed aloft and bombed us all day. Instead, it bombed us once and then dropped in and just started swinging for the fences. It was out for blood. That's going to be something that a party's going to remember. And they're going to go, I don't know why he didn't just stay up there and fireball us. That would have been the much smarter thing to do. But holy shit, are these devils just bloodthirsty, and we got to be careful of that, even though it was a tactical mistake.
Newguy, I think you recall, I don't know how, it was a long time ago, but when I was narrating for the Pit Fiend, I made it pretty apparent why he was landing and his motivations and them. And I think at that point he'd killed half of you with just fireballs. So I think, from a role playing the Pit Fiend perspective, he was getting a little bored. Yeah.
That's also appropriate.
I was alone in that tower. I was sad.
Yeah, if only the paladin had joined you and divine smited with every ballista bolt, we might have gotten somewhere. But no, he literally just sat down. When his paladin died, he did not return to the table.
So, in retrospect, hindsight being 2020, it was a successful encounter.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Good night.
Hi.
Yes, good night.
She really wants to say hi.
Yes.
Blinky says hello as well.
Great, my daughter's an international star already. Not even 2.
Speaking of the time.
Yeah, you guys want to go to break?
Yeah, I should probably do that.
Let's take a 10 to 15 minute break.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll be back 15 after-ish, 15 to 20 after. We'll be back. We got a lot more to talk about. If we run out of encounter bullshit to talk about, I have a backup topic. So we got another hour and 45.
The backup topic is also not porn, for those of you wondering.
Please don't ban me, Twitch. We'll be back. All right, everybody, we are back. Dancing, apparently. I don't remember where we left off, so maybe we should just go into a new topic.
We were on step 3 of the
environment.
Yeah, of the environment, and then we got into adversary tactics and
part of
how
step
that
2
ties in. Yeah.
Using the framework in the Dungeon Master's Guide for developing encounter. Part of step 3 is determining the difficulty you're going for: easy, medium, hard, deadly. That's part of step 2. And then step 3 is the environment. Yeah. I think that's pretty much it. 3 steps of making a combat encounter: what, why, how many, and how tough, and where.
Yeah.
It's literally the what, why, how, and where. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what is also who.
Well, okay. Well, hell, let's go down that on that avenue. We've got all the WHs except for when.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. That would be like either a step 0 or step 4, where like when in the session / the adventure does this encounter come up.
And then also on a more literal interpretation of it.
What timeline? Yeah.
Like what time of day, and if it's an outdoor encounter, is that pertinent?
Yeah, I suppose that helps in step 3 to know when, for purposes of lighting. Did you know that if you have dark vision, you still get disadvantage? It's not a secret the Jedi would tell you.
Wait, say again?
If you have dark vision, you still have disadvantage in darkness.
Yes. Wait.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Innocent until proven guilty. Prove it.
Okay, I wonder if I can... I'll have to comb through it, but I wonder if I could pull it up on the website here. Special traits, perhaps? Nope. Okay, I want size type of line. Let me do this. Dark vision.
Geez.
Check it out.
Okay.
Here we go. You ready? A monster with dark vision can see in the dark within a specified radius. The monster can see in dim light within the radius as if it were bright light, hence no penalty, and in darkness as if it were dim light.
Right, and okay, so yes. Wait.
Yeah. And in dim light you get disadvantage. Oh, and Vegas, thanks for this 8-month subscription, dude.
Oh yeah.
I thought you subscribed like 2 weeks ago.
So did I. It was
Also,
reminding me. But
why did my bots... Oh, Blinky Bob subscribed 5 months in a row. Blinky Bob, thank you.
Woo!
Thank you. Appreciate that a lot. Yeah, so if you're in total darkness, which is often where I use dark vision, yeah, your guys still get disadvantage. I'm going to turn this monitor off. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but boy, is it distracting.
I'm gonna call that one hand waved.
Yeah, I often don't. I often just forget, to be honest.
That's
why in the Underdark you gotta have some kind of bioluminescence.
Well, okay. I would say it gets rid of the advantage of having dark vision at all, but no, because if it's if it's a situation of total darkness, the human is guessing where they're swinging and attacking with disadvantage and not knowing if that's actually the square that their enemy is in. Whereas
unfortunately in 5th edition, being blinded just means you have disadvantage on attack rolls. It doesn't mechanically say you can't know where the enemy is. It's always played whereas you don't know where the enemy is. But like if you look at the... Because I actually had this problem in Fire and Blade. We had a player join us for a session and an hour, and then he rage quit, and that guy was so raw he made me blush, because he cast invisible. Like I had an enemy who was invisible, and he was like, well, according to the rules, all that mechanically happens is I have disadvantage. I'm like, Oh, okay. I guess you do that. And then the next session, he rage quit. So, that happened. Actually,
Yeah,
I think it was the
yeah.
same session where he was like being real rules lawyer and then quit the game. Good riddance and goodbye. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Yeah. So that's that. Oh no, I clicked on that. That was terrible. You guys are the best. Yeah, so that's how you build a. That's the basics, the basic tenets of building a combat encounter.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
And then I
Now,
asked you how you build other encounters, and you basically
right?
just said they happen, and I was like, great, thanks.
No,
Yeah.
no, I did not. No. So one, the whole point of this where I would differentiate a social encounter versus quote unquote normal role play is when the when I want to make a normal role play scene a social encounter is I will actively set up the scene, therefore tying in the exploration portion of it or a potential combat portion of it. And I will actively nudge the players towards making rolls to overcome the situation. Now, can they role play their way out of it? Yes. But when I'm thinking of it as a social encounter, there is going to be some roles tied into that role playing because there is typically a definitive, well, not a, it's a very blurry win condition and lose condition. A social encounter is something that you can win and you can lose depending on actions taken
Yeah,
and
it's like you either
potentially the
achieve your
outcomes of
objective
roles.
or you don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And and that's where I got into that you set the scene the right way, you use the environment to push your characters toward, just like in combat where you use the environment, you use the battle map to push your your party into certain actions, certain courses. You do the same for a social encounter. You use the scene, you use the NPCs to push them in a direction. That is where a social encounter differs from a non-encounter role play scene.
That reminded me. We gave the example here of how Alternity kind of adds mechanical value baked into
Right.
the game. There was also the Song of Ice and Fire role-playing game, which is flawed AF. I would not suggest it at all. It is very broken.
Just like most of the characters by the end of the series.
Yeah, it's like season 8 level broken. I would not suggest it at all. However, it did have
Not while I'm drinking, Jaken.
It had a system called Intrigue, which was basically social combat, and it had its own rules, and it was very unique. And quite honestly, it was cool. It was a cool concept. Where the thing was, you have an objective, and your opponent has an objective, and you're dealing damage to each other to try to achieve that objective. And it played okay. The problem was because it asked so many roles of you, we kind of had to stop role playing because it's like, bro, I've kind of given my argument. Like, okay,
can I make my roll now?
Can we just keep rolling until I win or lose? But anyway, other than that, there was this one line. We had a dungeon master who was fairly inexperienced, and he kind of had an us versus them. Both of you stop. An us versus them mentality that a lot of new GMs have, right? There was a line at the end of Intrigue that said, "Success doesn't always give you what you want the way you want it." And the DM read that line and interpreted it as, success doesn't always give you what you want, therefore you never get what you want. And my brother made a character whose entire mechanical aspect of it was intrigue. And once the DM started doing that, he's like, I guess I quit. Don't be that. Don't do that. Oh yeah. Well, Alenia, the book does not make any does not have any sex-oriented game mechanics. That was entirely our DM being way too Puritan.
Ugh.
Not like sex as in like sexual acts. I meant like gender.
Right. No.
Right, yeah.
Still. Ugh.
Yes, he didn't do it well. I hope he has learned since then. That was many years ago, and he continued to DM. Not with us though.
I wanna. No, I'm sorry. Please continue.
No, that was the end of the story.
okay.
If you're in, I mean, I don't know if anyone's watching this to make their own system, but as someone who dabbles in development, the intrigue system of Song of Ice and Fire was a good case study. Then that's the end. I'm ready to move on.
Okay. Touching back just super briefly because it occurred to me, discussing encounter design for all levels of DMs and all styles of DMs, going back to why I make that delineation between a quote-unquote regular RP scene and a social encounter. I do that for the purposes of what happens when you win a combat encounter. What is the guaranteed reward for the party upon winning a combat encounter?
Not being dead.
I was gonna say survival.
Experience points.
Right. I mean, I've gone entirely into milestone, but yes, experience points.
But even in milestone, there I feel like in campaign design, there should be a between these milestones, X-ish numbers of encounters should happen to justify leveling up.
Right.
Because if you do milestones of, okay, so the party just hit 5th level, the next milestone is as soon as they're done getting to the city they were headed to, and nothing happens on the way. Well, why the hell did they level? So by delineating a RP scene from a social encounter, because there's a win condition, there's a lose condition, there's roles involved with it, I can use, and I typically go milestone as well, but I will count a social encounter towards the purpose of tallying up encounters. Now, does a social encounter equal one combat encounter in my own personal head math? Not really. But depending on the stakes of it, it could. And depending on how the party performs. So using that as a specific encounter does help progress the mechanics of the game, as do exploration encounters such as puzzles, traps, mysteries.
I got another hot take.
Okay.
When I did my 1 to 20 campaign, not only did we use experience, but we did it where I told them how much experience they gained after every encounter.
Okay.
And I from the get-go, I didn't want them to just murder hobo my world in order to get the XP points. So I made it very obvious early on that if you don't fight, you can still get the experience. But my stipulation was there's always the threat of violence. But if you talk the ogres down, you get the experience as if you had defeated the ogres.
Because you've overcome that challenge.
Exactly. Or if you force them to flee, that counts. So that way they weren't just going into every time there was someone in front of them like, we need to kill these guys because I level up in 2,000 experience.
Right.
However, I wanted to point out that at some point during our long campaign, 1 to 20, I was like, I should really be rewarding them for social encounters, for exploration encounters. But I made the decision, based on months and months of play, that it didn't really work because, in my opinion, while there are class features about exploration and or social encounters, the fact that you're constantly getting hit points and this, that, and the other is that every level up was majority revolved around combat. And so
Agreed.
I never rewarded them experience for talking to someone.
Well, and that's why I say typically a social encounter is not going to be a one-for-one equivalent exchange to a combat encounter. But I realize we're talking about games where we sit around tables or around a Discord server and play make believe. But I throw a little bit of my own biased opinion on realism into it. You don't always just progress as a person through outright physical conflict. You can absolutely grow as a person and become better. And quite frankly, you can become a better judo practitioner. You can become more adept at it by studying psychology, by studying how to read someone. And it has nothing to do with the physical conflict practice.
I agree, but I think the way 5th edition is prevented, again, this is a hot take. You level up, that's combat. Even if you gain, like, your athletics check have advantages when you climb, swim, or jump. It's still combat to me. Anyway, that's why I just ultimately prefer Milestone, because in my head it's like, here's the act of the story. When it concludes, you level up. It doesn't matter how many times you fight, or don't fight. Yeah, Milestone's superior. Ooh, you gonna fight? You gonna fight IRL?
We're gonna fight.
God, I really need to get a piece of electrical tape right here.
Right where?
If you fight, will you level up?
Depends. Are we doing Milestone?
See, and this is a hot take versus Jaken moment. I disagree.
Okay.
I agree. Milestone vastly superior to calculated XP. Now,
also takes a lot of bookkeeping out of the equation.
Yeah, but by all means, retain your knowledge when you're building, when you're DMing and you're building encounters. Retain an understanding of the XP system, because the XP budget that comes with the way Wizards presents building encounters is good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give out that number of XP. Anyway, I disagree with and this is really weird saying this, because I'm much more of the, as mentioned earlier, pejorative not intended. I'm the slave to the narrative. You're the slave to the numbers. You're saying that it doesn't matter how many combats happen when the narrative dictates you level, whereas I'm saying
it's all included.
Sometimes you need to build that narrative around the number of combats that happen, because to have a party go, if the narrative insists that, okay, let's go back to the earlier example of, you leave this dungeon level 5, your milestone is when you reach your destination in the city across the continent, and you are just plagued by combats the entire way, and it takes you 5 sessions to get there because it's just combat. Every combat at level 5, as a player, I'm going to get livid if we don't level in the middle of that, because we've had so much combat, we've gained all this combat experience, and I'm stagnant. No, get out of here.
I should also say that I abhor the concept of an adventuring day. And typically every single one of my encounters is slated for hard or deadly, because I typically only do one encounter a day.
Right. I'll shoot for 2 in an adventuring day, unless it's a really big one, and then that's the one.
Right. I mean, obviously I've had my share of dungeons on Dire Roll.
Yeah, but I think slating it 1 per adventuring day That's far too much of the tension taken off of the table in a combat situation. Because if I can, for lack of a better term or a better phrase, just completely blow my load all over that encounter, like just utilize all my resources, knowing that we're going to have a long rest before the next encounter, then that encounter shouldn't just be hard, shouldn't just be deadly. That encounter, I should have to use all of my resources or we're all going to die.
Right. I agree to an extent, surely. I definitely don't pull any punches when there's only going to be one encounter for that day. But as a player, I actually really hate the resource management of 5th edition as a player.
Oh, I love it.
Because it's like, I'm out of all my things. Which is why I gravitate towards non-mass casters. You know, all 3 classes. I think I'm kind of running out of steam on this topic.
Are there... No, it is just the 3 classes, isn't it?
Of the core 12.
Yeah, Barbarian,
even including
Fighter,
Artificer.
Rogue.
Barbarian, Fighter, Rogue are the only base classes that don't have any spellcasting.
Right.
All 3 of them can get it. Yeah.
Subclasses.
Yeah. Although, I mean, most people play Paladins as basically a non-caster with Divine Smite, so there's that.
I've been trying to step away from that in Enfrost, and
it's hard though because Divine Smite's so good.
It's so good, and I've been trying to utilize some of my other abilities as well. I've been using the crap out of that. I use my reaction. I take that damage. They don't take that, which I need to stop doing because apparently I am a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
You have the 2nd lowest hit points in the group.
Yeah, and the sorcerer is only behind me by a few. Okay, so...
Well, warlocks are a caster, Blinky, but yes, you're right about barbarians, which is why I have yet to date play a barbarian. Most of my characters have been rogues and fighters. I did play a wizard that was a lot of fun, and then we had to stop the campaign because my daughter was too young.
Well, you also played a bard, but then...
Well, he was a bard rogue, though, so...
Wait,
yeah, but you switched to rogue. You wanted to be full bard, but then switched to rogue because of wild
the campaign
magic
was crap. I don't want to talk about it.
Hey, Bard Rogue is fun.
Bard Rogue is great, especially if you're a College of Swords swashbuckler.
That is a spectacular combo. I also really liked the Mastermind Whispers. I didn't get to get into as much Whispers as I wanted to, but
ironically, those subclasses were basically multi-class, but then you combine them and it becomes this like amalgamation of really, really complementary skills. Yeah.
Okay, so if we're
I don't know what else to talk about
on this one.
I mean, do you have anything else you want to add to the encounter conversation? Because I'm gonna have to pull out my my backup topic, and I don't know how long that's gonna run. I mean, we can always end early.
I think we should because we got around the whole. Here's how we each build encounters. Here's where we think it works. Here's where we think it doesn't work. If you were to summarize a paragraph on what advice you would have for DMs of all experience levels on how to build an encounter that works, go.
Well, unfortunately, I don't know if I can do that, because even with all my experience, I often accidentally create insanely powerful encounters, or accidentally throw the Lich at the party and then have them get completely squashed, even though you've been building them up for 5 levels. So it's not something that is going to be something you can have full mastery over ever, be confident to say, especially since dice are involved. I will say that reading your stat blocks and understanding your stat blocks before throwing a monster in is something that I overlook constantly for speed, but is absolutely necessary, especially if you buy Kobold Press books. If you buy Kobold Press books, you need to turn your Dungeon Master's Guide to creating monsters and crunch the numbers, because half of their CRs are wrong. Some of them are weaker than they say they are. Some of them are stronger than they say they are. And it's frustrating. Not to throw shade. Or am I? I think
You
the main thing to
totally are.
look at when you're looking at a stat block is, can they put out damage to one-shot a party member? That's pretty much all I look at. Because if they can do that, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 rounds, right? That's how most encounters go. But if you're just dropping dudes, yeah, you better foreshadow. I think I did a pretty decent job of foreshadowing the bear assassin. I hope I did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I was...
By having him yeet a named NPC as soon as he showed up, I wanted to prove to the party that the situation was dangerous, and I think they caught what I was picked up what I was putting down, and it worked really well. No one died. Yeah. Also, if you're like my brother, and you really like mind flayers, remember that only 2 classes in the entire game, before Artificer, have int saving throws.
Yep.
That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's more art than science, really. The science helps the art, for sure. The numbers are there to guide you. Another thing to look out for is action economy. If you want a boss and he doesn't have legendary actions, you better have a stupendous amount of hit points. Because otherwise he's going to attack once, miss, and then die, which happens to me all the time. But also don't just slap legendary on anything. That's why I don't. Legendary means legendary, in my opinion. Yeah, I wish I could say more. You're gonna screw up, and that's okay. Hopefully, you'll screw up in a way that makes your party feel like really powerful. Oh, and also, don't be afraid to make an encounter designed around letting the party flex. One example I have from D&D was I was like, wouldn't it be fun if I took the tomb and the Balrog fight from the Mines of Moria into an adventure. So it was a bunch of goblins, and they ended by fighting a Balor, right? But obviously they had to be high enough level to fight the Balor. So that means I threw 50 goblins and an ogre at them, and it was Newguy, you were there. Let me know. It seemed like they were having a blast because all the martial characters were dropping multiple goblins around. The warlock cast Sunbeam and was just like melting half the encounter. And I sent the goblins at them in phases so that they couldn't just fireball all 50 of them and call it a day. And it was a really fun encounter, and they had smiles on, and they were just, I mean, I couldn't see them because it was all voice, but I can hear it in their voice that they were just having a blast, just KOing legions of goblins. And at the end of it, they were all like laughing and joking, and they got to feel like 14th level, 15th level characters who fought something they can never fight at first or second level. And also sometimes your players will surprise you. Sometimes 2 of them will break off from the party and end up fighting all the phase spiders you had planned for the entire party and still win. And you're like, cool, I don't have to kill you. I don't know how you did that, but grats. And so, sometimes don't pull punches. Sometimes, yeah. That's advice. I don't know how valuable it is, but especially as your party gets higher level, let them just decimate a battlefield or 2, and then throw a Balor at them. And then, don't be afraid to challenge them. Really challenge them. Because also, player ingenuity, especially experienced players, they'll find a way to do something you weren't expecting, like banish your tree. That's me and Newguy are in a game without Vegas, so he didn't get that reference, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's my advice.
Or
Okay.
another reference, you build an entire freaking puzzle box that will poison the player if they don't understand the puzzle, but then a monk's immune to poison, just walks in and start pressing spells.
But don't change it. If that happens to you, they catch you unprepared and they literally can just walk up to your button and press it, even though it's supposed to be a poison gauntlet, let it happen because, hey, the monk's immune to poison, and gosh darn it, I bet you felt really good that you got to do that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so let it happen. But if you're about to kill your party, especially if you're newer, start making your monster be dumb. Or have a narrative out. Like when the Pit Fiend TPK'd, he was interested in slaves. So I made everyone death save, and everyone who stabilized woke up in a hell prison. And everyone who didn't died because I'm kind of devious that way. I don't mind players dying. Hey, you have a really cool character. Let me kill it real quick.
Hey, it brought up Chiron.
Unless your name is Caddy, then I can't kill you.
No matter how hard you try.
But if you're my wife, I'll kill you every session. I don't do nepotism up in here.
No, you do the opposite.
Tism Nepa?
Anyway, what about you, Vegas?
I'm gonna bullet point.
Okay, cool. I mean, that's kind of.
And I'm also, and I'm gonna aim this more in the perspective of how do I want to put that? More towards my audience than the general dire roll audience. I'm going to aim this more towards my advice for building encounters for inexperienced or young players, because I think you touched on all the important points of building something for experienced players. I'm going to fall back on my 3 pillars: combat, exploration, social. Every encounter you design needs to have 2 of those with interesting features, and try to avoid adding the third. If you do that, you're going to have something engaging for your players. You're going to have something for everyone at the table to focus on. Now, you may have none of them focus on your second pillar, and that's fine. It's still there. But if you do the 2, someone's going to have something to focus on and enjoy engaging with. As for the power level, the mechanics behind what you're designing, on the combat side of things, use your resources. As Jaken said, it's an art, not a science, but the science informs the art. Use the stuff that's in the DM's guide for building an encounter. Use themonstersknow.com. Utilize Kobold Fight Club. That is another
godsend.
It is chef's kiss. It's so good. And even like you can use it to be like, I want an encounter for this party, and hit the randomize button and use that to as a starting point, or just use it. Or use Kobold Fight Club to just track your combats if you're not using Roll20. If you're at a physical table and you've got a laptop or a tablet, pull it up. Use that to track. That's so great. Now, granted, I use a notepad to track HP, because that goes into the next point of don't pull punches, but do pull punches, especially with a younger crowd. Do not be eager ever with younger players to kill a character.
Point of order, I'm never eager to kill a character. I joke that I am because it happens often.
Right. No, I'm...
Also, I don't know how much of it is cropped out, because I did crop it, but that's Kobold Fight Club.
Yeah,
And if you can see, I have it configured for Enfrost already.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's such a great tool. Utilize it. I would say when DMing and designing encounters for less experienced players or younger players, go out of your way to not kill the character. If the monster, as I talked about earlier, if the monster needs to narratively die sooner than its hit points would indicate, do so. If it needs to stay alive a little bit longer narratively, and you decide to make that decision, if you make that decision and then next thing you know you roll damage that's going to completely decimate one of the characters, fudge it. I am very much a believer in narrative fudging, especially with less experienced players and younger players. Character death can be traumatic. Tread lightly.
Or
even with experienced players.
Or House of Jaken, we do not fudge. But yeah, for you newer players, I would definitely go with this suggestion.
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw my shade.
Well, no, but then that being said, once you've built your campaign up and you've foreshadowed and you've built up this adversary to the point where if your players, if you're taking whatever notes you have or looking over whatever stat block you have, listen to the chatter around the table. If your players are discussing amongst themselves how they're going to get through this, how they're going to defeat this adversary without dying, one down, if one of them goes down, one or two of them goes down, let that happen, because now you're building into the tension that they're building for themselves around what you foreshadowed. And two, in encounter design, as in narrative design and overall campaign design, always listen to the chatter at your table. If your players are talking about something that you had no intention for them to go down that path, go down that path. Reward them for solving the mystery or figuring out the plot. Even if that wasn't the plot, every now and then give it to them. If they come up with something in an encounter that you hadn't accounted for, rule of cool it. Reward them. Encounters are not just dice versus dice and may the better rolls win. That's not always how that plays out. Sometimes it does. Sometimes let it. But a lot of times adjust on the fly and reward your players, because the more powerful they feel, the more they feel like they came up with a great idea, the more they're going to continue investing and the more enthusiastic they're going to be, and that's just going to make your game better overall.
So two different schools of thought, but also for two different kind of groups.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we can jump into my next topic, but honestly, my next topic was more of just an idea I had.
Okay.
I suppose is fine, but...
Well, I have a question then.
Oh, yeah, yes, please, go ahead.
As a potentially future DM, because I've been mulling over an idea in my head, so I might start building a campaign on the side and then see to recruit players into that campaign. I want to think about building encounters that will be, not always, like some of them will be generic, but some of them will be memorable. And my question to you guys, which are a little bit more experienced DM, is, are the monsters, especially in the monster manual, but also the new one, the expanded collection or whatever, are they memorable, or do you sometimes prefer the idea of making your own with its own graphics, own idea, own personality, but still stats that you would recognize? Like it might have the stats of a goblin, but might be something with tentacles, and you're like, okay, what the hell is this? You know?
I think I'll answer first. there's two parts of that. One, I am someone who doesn't have a terrible amount of time. So if there's a stat block for it, I use it. But I know how to make my own monsters. And before I had kids, I had a lot of time. And you only really need to make monsters if you're filling a gap. If there isn't something that you want, it's statted, you make it yourself. And if you can reflavor a stat block, again, if you're someone like me who's pressed for time, you can do that too. So you can make, like a weird jellyfish that blinks in and out of dimensions. Just use a displacer beast for that, something like that. But the second part of your question was, what makes a fight memorable? And I think the best answer to that is, what fights are memorable as a player, because you already have your anecdotal evidence right there. I know for a fact, Newguy, that one of your more memorable encounters was one where you leapt off a ledge and grappled with a flame skull and punched it to death. Because you always bring it up, and I love that. And I'm proud that I did that. So sometimes the monsters are never going to be memorable, and it's what the players do with the environment.
And the pieces they are given.
Yeah. The way they break the mold. Like, hey, DM, can I grapple midair? And the DM goes, yeah, why not? Go nuts, you fucking monk. And then you grab onto a flaming skull and punch it to death. Pretty dope.
Yeah. I'll touch on the how to make it memorable first, just kind of segue in there. Yeah, that's what makes, I agree, what makes a combat memorable has less to do with the DM, and if your encounter design is consistently interesting and engaging, then the memorable moments are going to come from player actions and not how the player is interacting with the encounter, and not the design of the encounter itself. Now, all you're doing by creating an engaging encounter is throwing opportunity onto the table for players to make the combat memorable. Sometimes it'll happen, sometimes it doesn't. I personally am a huge fan of grappling midair. Also a monk, like just what's the Jackie Chan wall jump?
Yep.
Between a pillar and the wall up with and I didn't require it, but they rolled a nat 20 on acrobatics anyway. So they wall jumped up and grappled the drow priestess that was riding on the back of a giant spider, and then just dropped prone onto the ground and pulled her down off the ceiling and held her on the ground while the rest of the party came up and just absolutely destroyed her. And that was one is memorable for me as a DM, because it was like, oh, I didn't expect that to happen at all. And the player mentions it constantly. And that was just I put the pillars in initially to be a line of sight thing, so that they could maneuver around and avoid some of her spells, and he just went a completely different direction with it. So your encounter design isn't what makes it memorable, I don't think. It's how the player interacts with it. As for making new monsters, I've been DMing for, I'm just going to say, decades, and leave it at that. I think I have created monsters that I have then used in games. I can count on my fingers.
I made a lot more than that.
reskin. There's so much out there. And I mean, if you want to make monsters, do so. It's really fun. I'm just not very good at it. But okay, you've got this hunting party of Eladrin coming in from the Feywild. So they're all riding their Fey stags. But I mean, what does a classic hunting party have? Okay, it has hunting hounds that go with it. All right, so you give them dire wolves. All right,
Now
that's
you
cool.
give them Yeth hounds.
Okay, now you give them Yeth hounds. Okay, that's cool. Or you give them hellhounds. But instead of being fiends, they're fey, and instead of being fire, they are
Poison.
made of the earth, and they deal poison damage. Or instead of having a breath weapon, you take that and you roll that into you use the exact same stats. You give it poison damage, but now it's a bite attack. And it doesn't use an attack roll. They just make a dex save to avoid having the jaws snap down on them. You don't have to change any stats on that creature at all, except for fire damage to poison damage, and change the way it looks. And your players are going to be like, "Wow, that's a really cool that's a really cool hunting hound. I've never seen that before. What book did you get that out of?" Oh, I didn't get that out of a book. I got inspiration from some other monsters and, kind of did my thing with it. Lie through your teeth. That's another good advice for DMing in general, is just lie through your teeth all the time.
I did want to mention, although now I may have forgotten. Shit. What was your example? Oh. Something that one of my friends who was struggling with a particular player at his table. So this is directed at new DMs, right? He says, this is the example he gave. He's like, I have this player who's like a hardcore veteran, right? Old AD&D kind of player. And he keeps trying to do things that aren't in the rules and I don't know what to do. And he said, and one time they were fighting Driders, and he said he wanted to jump up on the back of the Drider and hold her arms back. And I just had to tell him, like, well, that's not in the rules. You can grapple her, but she's large, so you can't grapple her, so you can't do that. And he's like, what should I do? And again, I don't think I'm the expert, but I said, well, in my experience, if someone's trying to be creative, you just say yes. But if it's not something you really want them to do, you set the DC really high in your brain, but then you stick to it. So you're like, jumping on the back of a Drider and then holding her arms back, that's going to be a DC 25 athletics check. But then he rolls 26, you're like, okay, you do it. But if he rolls a 24, you're like, nah, brah, that wasn't good enough. Right. And that's what I told him to do. Set a DC in your brain, make it as hard as you want, but if they hit it, you got to roll with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And make it possible as well. Like, don't say DC.
Oh, 45. Yeah, don't say make a roll and the DC's 1001.
Oh, yeah, that's I mean, honestly, that's... Well, and to touch on a specific wording you use there, my number one go-to personal rule for DMing is a improv theater rule. Yes, and. Or yes, but. Don't shut a player down unless it's something absolutely, completely out of timbre, out of style, out of theme with everything that you're doing at the table. Like if you're playing D&D and I would like to pull out a laser rifle and blow that guy's left eye out the back of his head. Nah, dog. That's just a straight no. But with the example of jumping on the back of a Drider and holding her arms back, that was very much a yes but moment. It was, yes, you can do that, but it's going to be very difficult. And if you fail, you're going to be on the back of a very dangerous, very angry, half drow, half giant spider.
Or you get thrown off it to a space of my choice adjacent to the Drider, prone.
Right.
Yeah.
And always follow that up with a, are you sure you'd like to do that?
Always.
Oh yeah, the are you sure is always a strong argument.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, trial and error is always going to be how you do anything in life. Any other questions, Newguy? Any questions, chat, before we pivot to a different topic entirely?
Well, until I start doing encounter building myself, I don't think I'll have more questions that would be not up in the air. Like, the lack of experience would make me ask more questions, but I don't want you guys to just handhold me right now because I'm not building the campaign right now.
Sure.
Well, I would say, if as you go along, if you have further questions, and this goes for, I mean, this goes more for chat. I mean, obviously, Newguy, we speak to you regularly, but chat, if you come up with more questions, by all means, check out the video once it's uploaded on YouTube. Your question may have been answered in somewhere in the conversation, or if it hasn't been, by all means, hit us up on Twitter. I mean, I'm happy to have an ongoing conversation with this as long as it takes.
If you hit Dire Roll Up on Twitter, it may be a hot minute before you get a reply. That's all I'm going to say about that.
I don't know.
God, I really need. I want this to get closer to pick up to get the volume I want, but it makes my whole face red, like I'm a Sith Lord.
Do it.
Maybe you are.
Maybe I am. All right, you guys ready for the new topic? We got about an hour left.
Sure.
All right. So, most systems have group skill checks, and I personally call for them often, but I recently realized that I super duper hate them.
In what sense?
Well, they're dumb, and I shall now tell you why they're dumb, and then propose my house rule for fixing group skill checks.
Because objectively, they're poo-poo.
There are two primary instances when a group check occurs. The more likely scenario is one player in the party will say, I'm going to roll history to see if I know about this lore that they were talking about. And then they throw the dice and everyone looks and it's an 8. And before you, the DM, can be like, nah, brah, the next person down the line goes, you know what? I'm not skilled in history, but I want to roll history to see if I know. And then they roll a 6. And the next person in the line says, you know what? I would also like to see if I know anything about the lore. I am proficient in history. Let me roll. And they keep going until they've all rolled, or one person finally gets the DM to go, okay, what you know about this lore is... And that's how skill checks normally occur. The second time a skill check occurs is when the Dungeon Master says, everybody give me a stealth/perception check. And then with the perception check, they say, X and Y, you succeed, so you see this, but Z and A, you don't. And then they tell you anyway. Or they say, they make it a group success, where it's like, if a majority of you succeed, then you're hidden as a group. But if the majority of you fail, you're seen as a group. Or if they're really dicks, they're like, you got a 2. Everyone else succeeded, but you fucked your whole party. And all of those suck. I know that's subjective. Yes.
So the second part, I don't have anything for it. I don't have the experience. But the first part, I feel it's on the player's fault for trying to meta the role. Because I've seen it plenty in Enfrost happen between us, where it's like, Jaken says, Akulu, roll this to know if you know about this.
Well, sometimes
nobody else says, I want to roll
right.
because
I'm a fairly experienced DM, so when I say, because you are this, or you know this, give me this roll, which immediately tells the rest of the players, oh, I can't participate in this. But every now and then someone will say, I want to roll history, and then then the next person will start chiming in saying, you know what, I'll also roll history, and that's when I just go, everyone roll. Because I just want to skip the steps of everyone rolling and just get it all out. Now, I have a way. I thought of it in the shower, so it's not workshopped heavily. This morning, I took a shower, and I was like, God, I hate group checks. And I came up with a potential homebrew hack. We got DM hacks. on how to. And if this lands well with you guys and chat, I think I might make a self-contained. I really want to start making like DM advice videos for YouTube so that people actually watch my stuff, and maybe we'll get more viewers for the live plays, and maybe I won't be wasting my time.
You are not entertaining us.
That got dark real quick.
No, I love DMing and I'll never stop. But I do want to. I would love to turn this into like something I could get real money off of.
DM hacks,
or at least springboard it into a job writing for role playing games. That'd be cool too.
DM hacks.
Okay, so DM hacks, skill checks, right? So here's my proposal for how to change group skill checks. I don't know why I said that backwards. Whenever the DM decides it's for the whole group to roll, this is how it's done. If one person succeeds, then you have succeeded that skill check. If one person succeeds the stealth check, the group is hidden. If one person succeeds the history check, the group has this knowledge. Maybe they direct it through the successful player in that instance, but the task is successful. If no one succeeds, the task fails. And then, for every person beyond one that chooses to roll, if they fail or succeed, and the reason why this needs more workshopping is because it's going to add a little bit more bookkeeping. At the table, it might flow really well. But basically, for every person beyond the first that succeeds, you get... I'm just going to use basic terms, even though this term already exists in D&D. You get one advantage. And I was thinking, if you really want to dive deep into it, you can do it the way Fate does advantages, where you literally write out why that gave you advantage. But the mechanic of the advantage is effectively inspiration. Anyone in the party can pull that advantage out and say, I want to give myself advantage on this roll. And then mechanically they get it, but they're also supposed to say, because we did X, I get advantage on this roll. It doesn't have to super make sense, but as long as they can, that way there's a narrative flow to it. So it's like, because we did that research on that vampire in really good time, that gave me enough time to prepare to stake him on this instance. So I'm going to give myself advantage to stake this vampire. And then for every person who fails, you get a disadvantage, which is inspiration for the DM to use. Now, if the whole party fails, then for every person beyond the first person to roll in the group check, creates a disadvantage. So obviously the first failure in a total failure is you just fail the task.
Okay.
So the reason I propose this is because not everybody who's good at something is going to want to jump into there if they can penalize their party. So if this, like, everyone make an insight check, or let's do a group insight check. You would no longer say everybody make a check. We're going to do a group insight check. And then everyone at the table has to weigh in their mind, is my insight good enough to buy into this, to ante up effectively?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we all terrible at insight, so we need to all roll, because if we fail, we fail. But if only one person makes a check, it's just pass-fail. But for every person beyond the first, that's when you start creating a pool. Now, these advantage and disadvantage pools reset at the end of the session. So there is kind of the problem where if you have a group check towards the end of the session, it doesn't really mean anything. I would also say for 5th edition, if you use this homebrew to get rid of it, inspiration. To do this in place of.
I would agree with that.
All right, so thoughts, opinions?
So, quick question.
Yeah.
Let's take a very extreme scenario.
Yeah.
We're in a place where we see a piece of art on the wall, and it's about a king. And you say you have no idea what this king is, who this king is. So roll history. Let's say this player roll history, but all the other players do as you say, and they say, "I want to roll history too." Now they all fail. So the GM would get 3 disadvantage to use
for a 4-player party. Yeah.
Yeah. But how like, could you apply it to anything?
Yeah, any time I roll a d20 in the instance of 5th edition. However, I would say that you would obviously not want to use this for something insignificant, something that has no relevance. Like if the
Yeah.
painting, knowing where it came from, is just something that the player wants, and if he's proficient history, you can just say, "Yeah, dude, this is the painting, painted by painter to painter, born 400 years ago," and you just know that. But if it's like important to the story to know who painter to painter is, then perhaps.
Oh, you don't know Painter the Painter?
No, painter the painter. He's French.
Yeah, Painter the Painter.
Yeah.
My question was more of the fact that I find that this, of course, it's all up to the DM, and the DM wants this player to have fun, so he probably wouldn't do that. But at the same time, it gives the what do you call the sword that swings over your head? Pendulum sword of the DM saying, in the middle of combat, for no particular reason, you get disadvantage. I know that a DM would not, because it would remove the fun of the players, but still, it adds that that fear.
The intent is that that if you're making a group check, it is towards a goal, and if that goal is combat, it is a method of ramping tension.
No, I agree, but what I would think is I would add the caveat to your little rule of, since the thing, my example of the painting was bad, but since the thing would be relevant to the story, maybe the disadvantage could only be used when this piece of information needs to be important. So, for example, let's take the painting, even though it was not the best example. Let's say the party rolled history to see if this painting was actually good, and then was actually like a real painting about something important. And then they steal the painting and they try to sell it. At that point, the DM said, well, 3 of you failed, so I'm going to give you disadvantage on trying to sell it because you're not, the guy's not buying it. You look like total idiots when you're trying to sell it, so you're gonna get less money or something like that.
Right, that's why I said
the context of it.
Right, that's why I said to do it Fate style, where you actually write out what the advantage or the disadvantage is. But I think in order for the mechanic to work in practice, is to just either party can spend their resource whenever, and say because, like for example, if you're all rolling history check and you get a disadvantage or two, the disadvantage would read as follows: you wasted time. The 2 people who failed kept bringing up bad ideas and redirecting the people who knew the information to a different direction. And you know what? They wasted a lot of time. And so then when you're fighting the Wraith who was depicted in the painting, you guys spent so much time debating about the damn painting that this Wraith was able to study you, and bam, he's getting an advantage on this slap check.
Yep. I also have one thing, too, I would like to add to your system that makes me...
It's not a system. It is
not a system, but a
DM hack.
Homebrew rule that I think would be funny is, in one specific particular case, when information is trying to be gathered from someone, for example, inside check or history, maybe you could tack on something kind of funny for the parties, is if somebody, let's say 2 people roll, 1 succeed, 1 fail, you don't say who, if they both succeed or not, or failed or not. You don't tell them if they succeed or not based on their roll. You both give them information. Now, the player will have to use his roll. Let's say he got a 15. He says, I'm not sure if it's true, but the DM said from my thing I got blue, and the other player got 8, and he says from my thing I got red. So they would have to figure. So the more people roll, the less the information you give them, they can know if it's true or not, because they don't know what the DC was.
Well, instead of giving an advantage or disadvantage token, instead you can immediately spend the advantage and disadvantage to get more or get confused in your example. So if someone failed, you can feed them false information, but you don't tell them you failed. And if someone succeeded, and in addition, they get extra information. But sometimes as a DM, I can speak from experience, you don't always have more information. Sometimes the success gives you all you need. So I suppose that would be an option. But I think Vegas is ready to jump in on this.
Yeah.
And Chad, let me know how you feel. Blinky said, yeah, I think it would de-incentivize your no proficiency -1 in ask from rolling history. And you know what? Your no proficiency -1 in history is slowing the game down. And if you succeed, the guy who has +9 in history is going to be pretty pissed.
Not pissed.
They're like, dude, I have a +9 in history, but I rolled a nat 1. This -1 int person rolled a nat 20, got a 19, and succeeded. Yeah. What the hell? Why do I have a +9 in history? That happens a lot.
Yeah, no, and I will be the first to admit, as a player, I get salty about that.
Get bent,
when that happens.
Especially if you have expertise. It's like, bro, really? Yeah.
So
Although sometimes if everyone's playing, like and for us, sometimes it's funny as hell.
Workshopping a bit.
Yeah. I mean, literally, I came up with this in the shower this morning,
Right.
so it hasn't been thought out a whole lot.
So workshopping. Multiple advantages or disadvantage tokens. If we're replacing inspiration with it, then okay. But I would like to see, like, okay, so you were saying that one person succeeds, 3 people fail. So you succeed at the task, but then the DM gets three DM inspiration to use later?
Yeah.
Okay. That's rough. Are we going under the assumption that only one inspiration can be spent to affect our roll?
Yes.
So you can't use a DM inspiration when I've used my inspiration on a roll to cancel it out.
I would say, yeah.
Okay, good. And I can't use my own. I can't use the group inspiration and then someone else uses a group inspiration to affect, because you can't stack advantage or disadvantage.
No, you can't.
I would say we're gonna run into a similar situation of personal inspiration in that it's not going to get used as often as we would like, and we're just going to have a pile of tokens on each side of the table.
I don't know. I mean, hypothetically, if you're using group rolls a lot, but I don't think it comes up in my own sessions more than twice.
I agree there.
And also, it's a buy-in thing. You have to ante up.
Right.
So if it's like, hey, you guys can make an insight check here, and the one guy with the +9 insight's like, guys, I got this, and then everyone's like, yeah, I ain't gonna ante in. I think Blinky's mentioning, I think with this, again, I don't think it's foolproof. Otherwise, they probably would put it into 5th edition. But like, if you have the -1 int, but you gotta hit this, someone's gotta roll this history, then you can ante in, and maybe you're the hero. And I think that'd be more satisfying than if you just like, oh, the guy with +9 failed, I'm in. It'd have to be you guys pitch in all at once. You declare who's in this role before anyone tosses.
I would also go so far as to, in the style of Fate or Fantasy Flight games.
Yeah, I can see some simulators
canceling, like a
fail and a success cancel each other out.
Right. So
I think that would keep the pool smaller. Yeah.
Right, and that makes the pool even more impactful. So if 4 players roll,
1 failure, 3 successes.
Yeah, 1 failure, 3 successes. So that's 2 party inspiration, 1 DM inspiration, which equates out to 1 party inspiration,
and they succeed the task.
And you succeed the task. Or
I think that would work too. Yeah, I think that's better.
Yeah, or if you split the success, 2 people succeed, 2 people fail. That's 1 party inspiration, 2 DM, cancels out to 1 DM. Now, using this calculation the way we're doing it, even without the canceling, this favors the DM. Just the way it's built, because the first person rolling doesn't count towards this pool. Right.
I suppose you're right, but I think the whole point of it is to stop player abuse.
Right. Well, that's...
subjective player abuse.
I agree there, but looking at it from a all other things considered equal, the table is fair, game design, game balance point of view, this is never bet against the house.
I can see that.
So workshopping, I love the concept.
Yeah, I definitely need work. Stupid shower
There's only one thing that I thought about, though.
Okay.
In a case where there's 2 players, right?
Mm-hmm.
That have, let's say, an extreme +10 in insight, and they're rolling insight.
Okay.
Since they have a +10, it's obvious that they both are proficient in it. At a normal time, they would say one would roll and the other one would say, I give them advantage because I'm proficient.
That's the help action. That is different.
Yes.
We're talking about
no,
group
but wait.
checks.
No.
Yes, but wait.
And just super quick point of order.
Yeah.
You have to be proficient in order to help. That's a Jaken roll.
Is it? It might be. I think I did it because I was tired of people just helping.
Exactly, and it's a good rule.
Yes,
but it's
it is
not
a good
wrong.
rule.
Okay, that's a house rule.
So now the
GM
problem with
hacks
that is that if we had your GM axe to that, the two people that have 10 insight, instead of helping one another, will say, well, we might want to try and get a group help. So I will not help you, I will roll myself.
Yeah, but cool. If you're both really good at it, then both of you get to roll. Sometimes if you're both really good at something and only one person gets to roll, it's kind of like, oof. You know?
Fair enough. View from that perspective.
I think as a player, you're the one who wants to roll, right? But you also want the group to succeed. So there's a little give and take. I think that's why what often happens is if it hinges on one roll, what usually happens is everyone names out their bonuses, and then whoever gets the highest gets the help, and they roll. And that can still happen. Because help is different than a group. At least in D&D. I'd have to brush up on games like Alternity for help. Aiding another hero is different, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Blinky, make hand raising at the table again. No. Yeah, hand raising's great, and narratively it's hilarious.
Quit. Wait, hold on. Mean Girls reference. Quit trying to make hand raising a thing. Hand raising will never be a thing.
You're the one who made it a thing.
I really did,
Yeah.
and I'm so
Yeah,
proud
you're there
of
with the
myself
question.
for that. I'm so proud of myself for that.
It's especially funny in the thing where, like, you know, in D&D
Shouldn't
it's
he be in
not
bed?
typical, so often Jaken makes his player is NPCs going like, what's the Fjellfolk?
What is happening here? What?
Yeah, I love having the NPCs react to it. Because it's like your group's inside thing. It's like, why is he raising? What is happening? And then, like, when the NPCs start doing it, God, it's so much fun. Enfrost is great. If you're not watching Enfrost, what are you doing with your life?
Right.
I mean, either that or you're playing it, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, that was my whole backup topic, and it lasted 20 minutes. Nailed it.
Good topic. Yeah, no, I would in summary, workshop some more, but I love the concept of it, especially as a way to both rein in
necessary roles,
unsolicited group roles, and as a way of making inspiration great again.
I also, this may again be subjective. I also think it helps the characters who are specialized, especially in D&D, to be like, "Brah, team, I got this. I'm gonna make the group check alone. I'm going solo." You know. And also for people, because it's always a conflict in 5th edition when people are both really good at the same skill. It becomes, well, I have like +8 and you have a +9, so I guess I'm always helping you. No, we both roll, and if I succeed, we get jujus. So, you know, I think the theory is there. It might need a little bit more cleaning up.
Yeah, that's, yes, agreed. We'll have to, again, if you have further questions or if you think of any suggestions or would like to discuss this, this DM hack in its workshopping process, by all means, at Dire Roll.
Well, unless you guys got a topic you want to shift into, I'm kind of out of gas here. So,
Yeah.
Chat, you guys got any questions left unanswered that you want to tackle now? Now is the time. I do have one a bit. What? Blinky?
We love you, Blinky. What's your question?
I mean, okay, I don't. Yeah.
There's an inbound question.
Moral of the story: try Alternity, ignore TR. That was the whole reason we did it tonight.
I will counter yours with that. So let me add on to that. Ignore what everyone else says about encounter design. 3 pillars.
Wait a minute. That's what Wizard says about counter design.
Well, I mean, obviously they're learning from the best DMs of their game in the world.
I'm waiting for Blinky.
Okay, well, then I'm going to hit you with a new subject while we wait for Blinky.
Okay.
I'm, as I said, will eventually try my hand at building my own campaigns. I've tried before, but I fall short on the early Steam, which is I usually don't have enough built in to engage the players, like the back lore before the players actually dive into it and start playing. So, what are not the long term thing? I don't want like the long term strategy, but what are tips and tricks for you guys? When you start building a new lore or something like that, do you like write small post-it notes of little things you make sure not to forget? Like what's your just general elevator pitch strategy on how to build your
in
lore
the short
and background?
Term, how to build a lore and background. That's just writing it. I don't think that's really what you need to focus on. My brother loves lore and background, and he'll have this elaborate 100 years of history all written out, and he just can't wait to play it, and he can't wait to DM it, and then we sit down as a party, and we're like, okay. And he's like, so you're on an island. The number one thing your players are going to be interested in is motivation. The cliche of you meet in a smoky tavern with the quest giver is there for a reason. Again, playing Descent of Avernus, where the entire first half of the campaign is like, why are we going here? And my brother would look down and go, dude, it's in the book. We got to just go. I'm like, all right, we'll go to the chapel, I guess. It's in the book. You got to establish player motivation. Newer players need you to give them the motivation, and more experienced players, assuming you give them the okay, can create their own motivation. Sometimes they can be a real pain in the ass about it. But I think more important than your backstory is why is your party together and what are they trying to do right now. And if you don't have an answer to that, you don't have a campaign. The background stuff is interesting to you, usually, but if it's not story relevant or the party isn't, I mean, some party members are really into lore and want to dive deep, and that's great. And if you have it all written out, you're like, let me tell you about the dead gods. But if it's not story relevant, if it's not story relevant, it's not relevant. Like my brother has a habit. I'm not trying to crap on my brother. I don't think he's watching, but I love you and I want you to keep DMing.
Please continue crapping on him.
But he has a history of like having this intricate backstory that we just get to watch, and I'm like, bro, this isn't a campaign. This is a slideshow. So I think don't focus on backstory at first, especially if you're a new DM, unless you're really into that personally. Like, I think I'm better at backstory than planning adventures. But that's why most of my adventures are like off the cuff. A lot of my stuff, I usually prep the day before, and I don't prep ahead, except maybe like I know what's going to happen in the story later on. Like I knew the Siege of Enfrost was coming, but the players would do stuff. I'm like, okay, now I need to react to that instead of being like, in your face, this is what's happening with the backstory. Because the players are going to be driving the story, so let them drive the story. But yeah, I think if you're starting a campaign, why are they together and what are they doing right now is your number one priority.
Mm-hmm.
And if you lock that in, then backstory. Or if the backstory gives you your answer, that's the best. Like Enfrost, the backstory was the Ice Queen is coming to kill everyone. That's plenty of motivation to get the ball rolling. Then I just worked my steps backwards. How does the party find out? What do they need to do to prepare? And now we're at the siege of Suderhoffen, and everyone's on board with the motivation. Motivation is the most important thing. If you start a campaign when you don't have a clear objective for your party to do or why they're a team, and honestly, just saying you guys are a team is enough for most players. Yeah, that's more important than backstory. Vegas.
Hashtag same.
Okay, so Blinky Bob, so you have Hell ramp. Oh, nope, that's not the original question. Okay, the original question is, if you want to, as a DM, make someone seem urgent and like a big event is on the horizon without unnecessarily stressing the party or wrecking the campaign if they take too long to get to it, how do you do it effectively? And then she extends, so you have Hell ramping up to evade the prime material plane. How do you make them feel the constant pressure without risking having to say, well, that's a typo, but it made me laugh. Well, you guys messed up. Hell invaded. Campaign over. You lose. Or is it? Well, I'm not going to say it on stream because I don't want Twitch to ban me. Well, that is a great thing with expectations. From the onset, session 0, you tell your party, the campaign is Hell is ramping up to invade and you guys have to stop it. And if that's putting the cart before the horse, it's kind of necessary sometimes.
Yeah.
You got to establish expectations, and like I said to Newguy just now, you got to tell your party what the goal is. And if you never tell them that Hell is invading and the party creates their own motivations and decide, well, we just want to mine Mithril until we're rich and famous, you got to take some of the blame. Now, how to foreshadow and ramp it up? Not to do this too much, but Enfrost, I hope, is a pretty good example, where you start off with the cliche prophecy, and then there's rumors and people are coming from faraway lands saying, "Yo, things are getting rough over here," and then you let the party be proactive as often as they can. So you tell them hey, there's a sighting. Some people are saying there's a demonic ritual going on in these woods, and the party's like, well, our goal, as stated in session 0, is to stop the Hell invasion. So we're gonna go to that woods, and then you don't even have to motivate them; they're doing it on their own. If your party isn't giving you that, again, there's no wrong way to play D&D, but they're playing D&D wrong. Because if you told them in session 0, the campaign is Hell is coming, and you guys have to stop them, and they're like, no one cares about Hell, then either change the campaign to suit them, or say, guys, it sounds like you guys don't want to play my campaign. We should close the book on it. But as far as ramping it up and planting the seeds, here are some tips for the specific kind of Hell invasion thing, but any kind of impending apocalypse approaching. Start with a mystery, even though your players probably already know what the answer is. Like in Enfrost, I told everyone, Enfrost is about an invasion from the north that is threatening to wipe you out, and you have to stop it. That was my pitch to the players.
Mm-hmm.
But they knew that going in, but they're interested in role-playing, and so I gave them all this prophetic stuff and all this stuff, and their characters got to spin their wheels. But then you get the what would happen if that invasion as that gets closer to happening, what's happening? Like with your demons things, maybe there's cultists who are paving the way for their demons to come help them. So they're trying to establish a power base so that they get spared from the demon onslaught. And then that's peripheral stuff. That isn't fighting the demons yet, but you're fighting the cultists, and then they're spewing, esoteric nonsense that they can decipher as, wait a minute, what if they're right? In my 1 to 20 campaign, there was an event that villains kept bringing up because some of these villains had noble goals in their mind. They're like, listen, I'm converting everyone to the undead right now to stop the coming of these bad guys, and I need my own undead army to stop them. And I'm sorry you don't like my undead army, but I need my undead army to stop them. And the party's like, yeah, but whatever, you got an undead army, we're gonna kill you. And then more and more, everyone's saying, hey, this thing's gonna happen, and I gotta do this to do it. And eventually the party started going, yo, this is the third main villain to say he's trying to stop the thing from happening. Maybe this thing is gonna happen. And then the thing happened.
Yes. And then to dig a little bit deeper into specifically, how do you make it seem urgent like a big event without unnecessarily stressing the party or wrecking the campaign?
I
And
did miss that part.
we'll use the no. I think you hit that.
Oh, okay.
I'm digging further in. I would like to take umbrage with the phrase without unnecessarily stressing the party. You want to stress the party.
You want them spending every day at work going, shit, how do we stop this demon invasion?
No. The party, not the gaming group.
No,
but the game.
I disagree. Stress out the gaming group.
The gaming group too. If they're thinking about it in their day to day, as long as it's healthy, yes. So I think a way. I've always found if we're going back to the motivation conversation, and your party is lacking motivation, and you've been with the example of the Hell invasion, and kind of tying in Enfrost as well. You've got refugees streaming in saying this thing is happening here, and now that wasn't enough. So now you've got cultists setting up shop in the character's town, and that's not enough. You hit them where it hurts. You want to motivate your party? You have the cultists either attack something or take over something, and as Jaken brought up earlier, with the bear assassin, he had it one shot, bite the head off a named NPC, and
who had been
honestly,
with them from session 1.
Right. And she wasn't a huge part of the story.
Which is why we didn't mind killing her.
But she was a named NPC in this world that we had interaction with and that we had developed a kinship with.
Or at least a familiarity.
At least a familiarity. And all of a sudden, that's gone. That hit us where it hurt, and we went, oh shit, this bear assassin ain't no joke. That hitting us where it hurt was a way for Jaken to increase the tension of this combat. You can also use that same thing to increase the tension of the overall arc and to provide some motivation. If you have the cultists, and honestly, if we're going down the cultist route, what I would do personally running a game, cultists don't kill unnamed NPC that the players like. No. They convert unnamed NPC that the players like.
And that is a social encounter where you try to bring them back from the dark side.
A social encounter, Pillar 1, with threats of becoming a combat encounter, Pillar 2.
Because they're in the middle of summoning a demon.
Well, not even necessarily in the middle of summoning a demon. This NPC is now completely brainwashed, and if you don't play your cards right, the cultist didn't kill the NPC. You have to.
Right. Another thing I would say, specifically talking about you want the players to still have fun while feeling the weight of the world bearing down on them. The obvious answer, which I'm sorry it took me so long to get here, is just keep letting them win. I mean, they have to lose for the prove the situation is serious, but put them in situations where they can win. Using Enfrost as an example, it's basically a string of wins, but they're never really hitting the main issue. It's always dealing with the side effects. But then I, in order to drive the point home, I made them lose when it mattered, specifically when they marched out thinking they could make a difference on the open battlefield, and they got crushed. And fortunately, my players trusted me enough to take that beating and turn it into a character motivation, instead of being like, bro, what the hell? How do we win this?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, I almost rage quit that day.
No, you didn't.
But
let him win. Let him win. I mean, like, with Enfrost, the city was infiltrated with saboteurs and spies. The party found out about it and killed them. They won. They didn't solve the problem. Enfrost is still coming, but they killed the cultists. You know, they won. Let them have wins. Let them keep having wins. But every win reminds them, that they really haven't won yet. The big thing is coming, and maybe this isn't really going to help, or maybe it will.
Yeah.
They hope it will. That's how you keep them having fun, is you let them win.
And both Vegas and Jaken pointed out something important as well, is it doesn't have to be a direct effect on the players, but having cues that tells your party, your group, of the ticking bomb that's happening. For example, the refugees, the fact that a castle up north got destroyed and the news is traveling south, and getting it slowly closer to the players without giving them a set time. Because me personally, as a player, is when I hate, for example, one of the Legend of Zelda, I think Majora's Mask, I know you can extend the time, but I hate being stressed because I see the countdown at the top of the screen that's like 14 days and you're done. I hate that. But having Jaken saying, hey, it's getting worse. It's getting worse. You don't know what's happening, but it's getting worse. And it's getting worse. I like the stretch of, I know it's getting worse. I'm getting the pressure, but it's not set in stone.
No ticking clocks is good. No real ticking clocks.
Yeah, one thing Jaken has done with Enfrost that I'm not gonna ask him for an answer here. In fact, I don't want an answer here, or I don't want an explanation rather. The calendar. Whether or not there is a legit expiration date on when Scothy shows up and we have to and this is it. The first time, like, I saw the calendar when I pulled up the player information, the campaign information, and I was like, oh cool, he's got a calendar. And then the first time he went in and said, okay, let me update this calendar, it's been such and such days, I went, oh no. Because, and like I said, I don't want an explanation.
It's a useful tool, is all I'm going to say.
Right. What I believe the explanation is, and I'll ask for an explanation once the campaign is over. What I believe the explanation is there is not an expiration date. He did want to use it to make sure that we got to winter, but now, like, my heart skips a beat every time he updates the calendar now that we're in winter. Even though I'm hoping what the answer is that no, there's no expiration date. He's just using that to make my heart skip a beat, which is one of the most effective tools the DM can do. It's the are you sure you want to do that? It's the when you're sitting at a physical table and you've got a DM screen. It's when someone is doing something and you just start moving your dice around as if you're counting them out. Little physical things like that we can see as a player that make us go, uh-oh. That is one of the most impactful tools as a DM you can ever use. It's so good.
But also, slightly contrarian to that, at the end of Fire and Blade, there was a time that the alignment was going to happen. And I told the party point blank, the alignment is going to happen when you guys get there. But don't drag your feet, is what I told them. Point blank. Because I didn't want them to feel like, oh, we only have 2 weeks and it's going to take like X days to get... No, I'm like, okay, guys, look, I know that this has a day that it's going to happen. But let's just be real here. It's going to happen when you get there. Now, that may not be what you're going for, because obviously Fire and Blade and Enfrost are two separate entities, but they both had an event coming up. One was a slow build, and the other one was also a slow build, but also, like, it had like, I believe it was an eclipse, where it's like when the eclipse happens, the alignment happens, it has a specific day. So, in order to make sure that the party wasn't too stressed and having fun, I told them point blank, don't stress it. It'll happen when you get there. But I also told them you gotta go. Like, no side shit. So that's another avenue you can go to. If you really, if it looks like the party is going to stress out over time, you can just be like, guys, don't worry. But again, that kind of deflates the soul build. So that's two different approaches. One is more of a, don't worry about it. The other one is like, worry about it. I'm going to add 3 days to the calendar.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine, and and this is a little bit of a not a peek behind the DM curtain, but
hang on. I do want to quantify one thing. I think the main difference between Enfrost and Fire and Blade is that in Enfrost the threat was coming to them, and in Fireblade they were going to the threat. So that was a stark contrast to the ticking clock. You were saying.
A little bit of a peek, not behind the DM curtain, but behind the produced, whether it's YouTube or Twitch or Mixer or a podcast, a produced D&D game.
What are you about to do? What are you doing?
Little peek behind the curtain
is
that as players, we are granted a little bit more knowledge than a group of friends sitting around a table, because we're producing something for entertainment beyond just us. As players, we have a responsibility to keep things moving and keep things entertaining, not just for those of us around the table, but for our viewers as well. And that takes a little bit of pressure off of the DM's plate, and B means that we there's a little bit less of the player tension when some things are involved. Now, that's not to say that we know how Enfrost is going to turn out. I have no idea how Enfrost is going to turn out.
I don't know how Enfrost is going to turn out.
I'm very happy to not know how Enfrost is going to turn out. If you took away all the tension and this was just, it wouldn't be cooperative storytelling anymore. It would be acting out a script. And that's not what we're here for. But in the case of a home game, sitting around a table, or Roll20, in a non-streamed, non-produced game, I wouldn't go so far as Jaken did with the guys. Don't stress the time; it'll happen when you get there. I would go down the route of stress the time.
You have 2 weeks.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
You have 2 weeks.
Well, I also didn't want them to show up early, so there was another reason to not put a finer point on it. But yeah, those are two different instances, I think.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want them to show up before the alignment and ruin my ending. So there was that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hope... Did they answer your question, Blinky? Before we just start repeating ourselves?
You're repeating yourself.
Dope.
You're repeating yourself. You're repeating yourself.
All right, last call for questions, and then we're going to call it a night.
So finish your whiskey or beer.
Now I want a beer.
Me too, and
Thanks.
I've got pizza waiting for me.
How does
Enfrost... We've been out of beer for like 2 weeks now.
I have no idea how Enfrost ends.
Neither my father or I want to go get more.
I can tell you how I hope it doesn't end, but it could definitely end. It could end with 4 tombstones, yeah.
Well, no, 3.
Oh,
you
right,
because
Caddy would still be alive, right?
Yeah. Well, no, in that case, 2, because Hakan's body would just be tossed aside.
Don't get all fucking. Y'all know what I mean.
Between being tossed aside or buried with a horse stance tombstone.
Mummified horse stance.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope this has been entertaining. I know Blinky had fun, and you know what? If Blinky had fun, it was a success. To the rest of you, I hope you guys had fun. I hope we were insightful, or at the very least, not pedantic. And I'm gonna workshop that group check idea, and hopefully in the near future, I'll put out a well thought out scripted video on my YouTube channel. And it will hopefully be the first of regular content on there. But I'm not going to make any promises because I have 2 children under 5, and it's hard to record without screaming. So everyone...
And the kids are loud too.
Right. Next week, sans any emergency, we'll be back to regular programming with Enfrost. We are very close to the conclusion of the campaign. Don't miss it if you're into it. And if you're not into it, get into it. I don't know, I thought of Woody when he said, if you don't have a moving buddy, get one. My son has been watching that on repeat.
Honestly, that needs to be a catchphrase. That needs to be a Jaken catchphrase.
But I stole it from Woody. Anyway, everyone have a great night. We will see you next week.